Well, while Renegades have already punched their ticket over there to the playoffs, there's still something left to be decided here, Hindu, and it is going to be first, second, third seed that needs to be sorted out up at the top. And Radiance has their chance to play upset this time around as they take on Sanguine. And this is looking like, it's going to be a really fun set to be able to come through. Don't be, misled by that number 5 next to Radiance. They are competing with these top teams.
Yeah, completely agree. I actually don't know the situation between PK and Radiance of like, if Radiance do win this set, do they go above PK in the standings overall? Because that could be a big feature of this too when you think about it, because that positional awareness of third versus fourth, well, third versus four, if you're fifth, you're going to have to play against 3 or 4 in the playoff situation. So big game for Radiant still, but even bigger for Sanguine and Go. How can we be talking about Sanguine being in the top 3 right now? Nobody saw it coming outside of maybe themselves.
I mean, yeah, that was the conversation coming into this. I mean, I remember in December even people saying that they didn't even know if the team was going to be able to hold a candle to some of these other, from what we've seen, in the past out of them. And not only have they been able to prove people wrong, but there's a chance today, I believe, if they 2-0 this, if they do not drop a single game, that they take over that first place spot. So there's things like that come into the equation. And the fact that really comes into it is that all they have to do is win one, and they get that top 2, which is pretty much all you need to be able to rub it in the face of everyone who is doubting you.
And Sanguine coming into this, I mean, realistically, even I was like, they will come 6th, is my prediction of where they would end up. They are fighting for first today. The final day, and they're fighting for first place. Listen, this Sanguine team, right, it shows how important chemistry and teamwork really is to SMITE. You can have individual skill. You can play your heart out. But if your team as a whole isn't on the same page and working as a well-oiled machine, you're going to struggle. And Sanguine have really just shown by having that chemistry, that camaraderie, and that level of effort that they really put in time and time again, not just in Pro League play, but all levels of their play consistently, that you can be the very best. It's really one of those, it feels like I'm a part of a cartoon right now, or an anime, where these guys are like showing you like, yeah, if you're good, you're going to be great. And it's kind of that whole feel that I get from the Sanguine team. And the sky is always looking bright for them. The only way is up at the moment. I've not really seen them struggle too much. In the times they have struggled, they've corrected it very quickly.
It really does, I mean, like you say, fit what you would expect to learn from, a children's show or something like that. Honestly, even movies that I've watched in the last year have that same message where it showcases kind of what you're taught, if you're a musician, things like that. Talent can get you so far, but it really is the hard work that you put in outside of that makes the big difference. And it seems like Sanguine, as everyone has been, able to point out, don't mind putting the grind on anytime you log into SMITE. There's a good chance you're going to see them playing. Netriod is just one of the cogs that helps make this team work, but he's one of the ones that's been the most consistent. We actually have him standing by so we can talk to him before this big set.
Okay, well, I've got Netriod here, the hunter for Sanguine, one of our absolute top teams here right now. And I got to ask you about last week first before we get too much into this next matchup, because I think that was you all's biggest win yet up against the Knights. You looked great. What is it about your late game that makes it so unbeatable that even against like Aphrodite, Kali, and Kepri, you guys were still able to find a way to get it done?
I think that our team fight potential comes when everyone is talking and like saying, okay, we should do this or we shouldn't do this. When we are in team fights, we are like, okay, so for example, Shinto is gonna do this, and Netra is gonna be there for something else, or something else happens. So I think the coordination and the synergy we have is what make us stronger in team fights, I think.
I think you're right, man. We see it bear out week after week at this point, so it's got to be the truth. Let's talk a little bit then about this set that's coming up here for you, because we're going to be closing out the entire phase with you guys up against Radiance. But I think that with the way that you've been playing, you all are probably the slight favorites. Do you think that's fair to say that based on you guys' record, you have a slight edge coming into this one?
I mean, I said it before, like we are just it is our first time playing the SPL, like at least this
Right.
split or this year, so it's normal for people that think that we are gonna be like underperforming or we're gonna have like bad matches. So I don't judge them, but I think that how we've been playing, we are gonna win this set for sure. So I'm really glad about it.
I love to hear that confidence coming from you guys, man. Do you have a specific game plan of where you want to attack? We've seen a lot of success with teams kind of trying to bully out Cyclone Spin early on, or something like that. Have you guys seen any weaknesses you're trying to exploit here this week in particular?
I will say that Radiance is a really solid team. They have been playing kind of sloppy, like these last matches they have been
I
playing.
agree.
So, but at the same time, I mean, just looking at the players, like putting them on paper, they are like a really strong team. So we don't know. Maybe they have like adjusted their errors and they're coming as stronger than ever. But I'm confident with my team, so at least those are gonna be good matches.
I'm glad to hear you're confident, but still giving Radiance the respect they've earned, man. That's a perfect place to be. Again, it's always great to have a chance to talk to the Netriod, hear a little bit more about what's going on with the guys behind the scenes. Good luck, man, in your match coming up.
Thank you.
Well, I like the confidence they have. It's well earned at this point, considering the grind that they've made here in the first phase. And it's really weird because, I guess 10 weeks ago, since we're at the end of week 10, if you had asked anybody that Sanguine could potentially beat this Radiance squad, they probably would have just laughed in your face, Hindu. But now they're coming into it, and not only is it a feasible win for them, but based on what we've been seeing out of Radiance, it's something that could happen maybe even as a 2-0.
It's a good point, and I think the big thing about Sanguine here is, in the long run for them, this is their first split, you heard Netriod say it there, it's about them staying confident in their own ability, but also humble, because a lot of times we see players get to the top, and that humbleness starts to shine away a little bit, and it causes them problems in the long run, where they don't invest as much as they once were. I just hope Sanguine keep that pressure up as time goes on, but turn the conversation towards Radiance, like you said. I mean, yeah, Radiance haven't played to the standard that we would expect them to, but more importantly, they've not been playing to the standard they themselves have expected them to, and they've been honest about that. And I think that's such a good point for a team to be self-reflecting on where they feel they stand and if they're in the right sort of situation that the fans feel about. Radiance have been inconsistent this year. They got off to a good start, but since then, they've been dwindling here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah, it's definitely the big turnaround. I'm honestly not sure which matchup in this that I'm most excited for, but it might be Adapting versus Panatom. I feel like the junglers here have been crucial. I mean, Adapting may be one of the ones that is the driving factor for Radiance. Panatom could pretty much be the same engine there for Sanguine, at least early on, and getting those kills going. I mean, what is it about this matchup, at least for you, that gets you so excited to watch them go at it?
I think, for me, I'm a big support player anyway. Honestly, Goza, you know that for a fact. I love the support players. Rongyu and Aurora are two different styles of support as well, I want to say. Oh, yeah. Aurora's definitely a very good in-your-face support, mechanically so, and he's very good at getting on the front line. I feel like Rongyu, on the other hand, is very much a fantastic sort of defensive peeling support, but has the ability to do the other way of looking at that too, of the aggressive style too, if required. I definitely feel like that matchup specifically is going to be an important one into this fray, especially when, you already talked about the jungle setup here, and like, yeah, Adapted and Panatom are going to square pretty effectively against each other. I think that's going to come down to what picks they choose, how the playstyle may develop through the beginning of this set.
I'm actually really happy we had those highlights as well, because I completely forgot that anybody outside of Dardes had picked Hera at any point. Big Man Tings, I think, being able to and willing to pull that out. One of the things that Sanguine has had that people have mentioned is maybe a little bit of predictability. Radiance have been able to flex around a little bit more, and well, who knows about the team's flexibility other than their coach Biggie, who we have standing by right now to be able to talk to us a little bit as they get set up to go against Sanguine.
All right, well, I do have Biggie here with me, coach for Radiance, and you all were kind of labeled, I feel like, as the super team coming into this season. Now that Phase 1 is pretty much wrapping up, you still have this big set with Sanguine left, but how do y'all feel like it? Would you say that was a success overall? Do you feel like you performed at the level you expected? How would you say this first phase went for you all?
No, I wouldn't say it was a success at all. I think we started strong, but I don't think we played that well even when we were winning a lot. I feel like a lot of teams were probably just hadn't figured out what they want to do yet. And we kind of had a good idea, but I don't feel like we played well at all. And we've kind of just struggled to mesh as a team, not kind of personality-wise, just in-game. I feel like we just haven't figured out exactly what we want to pick, exactly how we want to play. And we've changed so much this split that it's just been inconsistent. But I feel like we're slowly getting there, and hopefully MSI will be a good test for us just to sort of see if what we're doing now is correct and whatnot, as well as the Sanguine set.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the Sanguine set. It's not going to change a ton for you all in terms of what's going to be. You're definitely going to be going to the playoffs, to MSI, right? That's happening for sure. But, just how much are you all focused on this Sanguine set? Because I think it is still a good barometer for you, a chance to see kind of where you stand heading into MSI.
We've done like our normal prep. It's not like we're not thinking about it, obviously. They're one of the best teams in the league, easily. And they are probably one of the hardest teams to draft against, just because they have a lot of kind of comfort picks I don't think they ever really force themselves into a bad draft or you can outdraft them. You just kind of have to take away the picks they perform best on and then get yourself a comfortable draft, hopefully. And you just have to play really well, I feel, against Sanguine.
Okay, well, talk to me a little bit about the team dynamic, because I feel like we still don't really know how Radiance kind of, works a bit behind the scenes. You tell me, as much as you feel comfortable with, but, who's sort of, on the day, in the moment, who's kind of, I guess, the leader here for this squad? Is that something that Aurora takes a lot of responsibility for, or talk to me a bit about that dynamic?
Yeah, Aurora's pretty strongly opinionated on what he wants to do and how he wants to play, so a lot of what we're trying to do, but we haven't really succeeded yet, is run through him. But I would say also Kenneth is a big kind of driving force in the team during the game, early game, mid game now. And then everyone kind of just plays off of what he wants to do, him and Aurora, as much as possible. But I mean, we've also been trying to get Big Man to have a bit more of a kind of impact role in what we do around the map, so it's a slow process, but that's basically the gist of it.
It is a lot that you all have to adjust. You've still got plenty of time, I think, between now and MSI, which really is kind of the biggest point here for that first phase. I appreciate you, Biggie, giving us some insight, man, a little bit about how the team works, and some of that stuff that we can't see. And good luck in your match coming up here up against Sanguine.
All right, thanks.
Well, it is going to be, interesting to see what they've changed on the side of Radiance coming into this one. Because as is mentioned, I mean, he just said he wanted to bring Big Man kind of more into the forefront, be more integral in this team. And Hindu, it feels like that's been the case for a lot of these mid laners. I mean, even earlier on this year, we were talking to Obey, and it was kind of play through Wolfie. Do you think Big Man could be maybe the deciding factor here for Radiance?
Potentially, yeah, but I think the biggest talking point of what we saw from Biggie there was exactly what a lot of people thought about Radiance at the start of the year. How would the personalities and the decision-making and the chemistry really mesh on this Radiant squad? And that conversation kind of disappeared really quickly with how they got off to the start of the season. The problem is that, those issues still were there that people predicted would happen. And now they're starting to see that thing. Both Aurora and Adapting are major voices that want to stand out and be involved in the decision-making and the construction of the game. Whereas, look at a team like Obey, for example, they had the other issue. They had no leadership. Radiance had a lot of leadership, a lot of input. And I think that's why they've struggled a little bit more through the season. Biggie just giving us kind of a more insight into that more than anything else. And granted, I think talking about Big Man there, like you were saying, Big Man has been a big part of it this year. His performances have been solid, consistent, seriously consistent throughout the whole split. And I think that's why Biggie brings up the idea of trying to get Big Man into that. The problem is trying to fit that into Aurora's playstyle and Adapting's playstyle is definitely where they're struggling.
Well, the question is going to be whether or not they can make it work today. And they can play upset realistically and maybe force Sanguine to play more games next week than they were prepared to. But we have to figure it all out through game number 1. But to get there, we have to go through picks and bans here for Sanguine and Radiance. And honestly, I'm trying to think about it. I mean, the way you worded it earlier, Aurora, the supports, very different styles of play. The only ones that realistically overlap to me are probably mid and jungle. And for the most part, it is going to be that Adapting Panatom, maybe Godpool, that kind of clashes with each other.
Yeah, agreed. And I do think the wrong you Raw matchup as well. I think the battle might be over Yamoja at some point there as well. Both of them do like it. And there may be a look to take it away from one or the other. Maybe it'll just get banned out in this phase more than anything else. I do predict maybe, Netriod may get looked at here. Maybe Shinto a little bit. A Merlin ban could be on the cards from Radiance, I would say. Just to take that comfort away from the mid laner of Sanguine.
Well, as of right now, it's Camazotz, Hercules, and King Arthur that is going to get banned out here. Lala decided to take a special interest in this set as well. as it's a big one to come through. Merlin, and honestly, it feels like King Arthur's control over there in the solo lane, right? Merlin, control in the mid, Camazot's solo jungle. The only one that really stands out to me as a specific team and a specific player is that Hercules right now.
Yeah, it's definitely a shot towards Aurora. Make sure he's not got that available to him, and it makes a lot of sense to take that away from him. But look at the shots Radiance find. Jakor, no King Arthur for you. You're not going to get a nice, easy, comfy lane there. Shinto, no comfort out of that Merlin. You're going to have to go a little bit deeper. Obviously, he's got quite a few gods in mid he can play anyway, so don't be surprised to see Sanguine just go a little bit deeper there. You know, obviously, Radiance still available too. Could be a look. Wouldn't necessarily look to first pick, however.
Well, Yamoja still available, and we had highlights, I believe, from both of these teams playing her, so it looks like that's where Sanguine want to go first. But like you said, Raijin, Morgan still available here. Someone who I'm kind of surprised we haven't seen more of, I think, coming into just this week in general. I think last week as well, considering what we saw out of her the first few times she's been played. Baba Yaga also available. So I think a plethora of picks available for these teams. And, well, who else would Adapting want to go back to than, well, the one, the only Thor?
But again, it's taken away from Panitom, who is a fantastic Thor himself, so trying to limit some of that engage potential from him. Yamoja pick for Rongu doesn't surprise me. More than likely for Rongu. I don't really see it going anywhere else at the moment. But I do like the pick so far. Taking into account, you mentioned the Morrigan. The only real player I would say I'd likely to see Morrigan on is probably Cyclone Spin on Radiance. But with that all selection, it's kind of potentially not available anyway. I predict that's probably going to Cyclone here so far.
Yeah, give them on something comfortable. I feel like Cyclone and Radiance as a whole, their duo lane is unpredictable sometimes. I mean, sometimes we come in and it's like, cool, he's playing set ADC, and sometimes, well, it is just going to be this Ullr that we have seen him on countless times run the show with it. It's going to be going up against the Jing Wei over there with the Yamoja. It feels like a pretty sustained, comfortable lane for Sanguine. And this Nike, which I'll admit doesn't jump out to me, initially as a Panatom god.
I agree, it doesn't to me, but we've seen a lot of jungle warriors as of late, and we saw Sino bringing the Nike in first of all. But then, just recently, this past weekend, we did see a little bit more Nike solo. So Nike is a flexible pick for the most part. Don't be surprised to see Sanguine maybe adjust this for jungle or for the solo lane, dependent on how the state of affairs goes elsewhere in these picks and bans.
And we've seen Yarkor, I think, much to your point, kind of flex around onto anything he wants over there, to the point where some picks that felt like they weren't even ever going to happen because it felt like he was maybe just a Jormungandr player has now evolved into some of these others. So Nike, like you said, still maybe on the list over there. Raijin going to be banned out here away from Sanguine, but also away from Radiance, who haven't picked anyone mid unless they're throwing that Ullr over there. So it's kind of keeping this flexibility available for themselves and taking off pretty much the two ticks I have for Shinto. Get rid of Merlin, get rid of Raijin, make sure he's not comfortable.
I do like the Amaterasu pick there from Radiance before the caravan phase, mainly for the solo lane, because in that specific matchup, if it is Nike there, the cancel out of that rend can be done with the silence of an Amaterasu, just to reduce a bit of the wave clear potential there. But not only that, it's fire with fire to an extent, with two great team fight ultimates coming into play. Mulan Band as well kind of tells me that Radiance aren't 100% sure their goal, where that Nike's going still.
Yeah, it's the one pick that I think Yarkor has been able to turn more to his own lately has been this Mulan. But it's going to be the Terra, it's going to be the Ganesh on the other side that are banned away, so a little bit of the support man's trying to control Aurora. But they let through the one that I would actually argue has been biggest for Sanguine and Space Station here. This Khepri has been game-changing.
Khepri's really coming to his own. Honestly, I didn't really see his win rate. I think it was 60%. I just saw at the bottom of the screen as we transition. But yeah, I think Khepri's done a very solid job as of late. Lane clear's not the worst in the world, actually pretty effective. But more importantly, it just facilitates these frontline divers even more so. So these assassins, these warriors that dive on in deep or go too far, bring them back into the fold with that resurrection. At the same time as keep a backline peeler for your carries. That's why Khepri's so useful. Does the frontline and the backline very effectively.
Well, there's only one thing that burns through that ult, and normally it's executes, but I guess, hey, if they're going to have an extra life, you could just heal your team enough that you're not going to worry about it, along with the Susana there for Panatom, so it does look like that Nike going solo. I mean, how do you like this lineup for Sanguine?
It looks really good right now. That Hell pick is definitely screaming to me Radiance need anti-heal. And honestly, I think the ult pick is going to be fine for that with Brawler's Beat Stick, but they need something that's going to be able to apply Divine Ruin in the mid lane effectively. Hera can do that. Bit of shield to fight shield in action here. These are two evenly matched teams. I think it's going to come down to the early game, jungle versus jungle for me. Can we see Adapting get online and going early before Susano can make his action? Because as everyone always says, the longer the game goes with sustain, Hell comes online. Good cleansing available too for him. It's all about Shinto's positioning here and how much we can see in the jungle.
Probably the least aggressive mid I've seen him on when it comes down to it, but still something he can probably frag out on the way he has in the past on Merlin and Raijin. It'll be interesting to see. I also didn't have Hera for my SPL bingo today, and as far as I know, I mean, this is an interesting draft from Radiance. It feels a little bit all over the place, but they have their win conditions.
Yeah, a little bit awkward for Hera a little bit here, though, Gorgeous, because of the fact that she's not really got too much mobility. Most of her survival is just shields and use Augurs to her advantage. Look at the squad Sanguine have here. Your Moja's going to be very good at like nullifying Hera a little bit, keeping her trapped inside that River's Rebuke. Then you've also gone on top of that a Susanoo and a Nike able to dive on in. Rough game for Big Man, big one for him too.
Well, healing is going to be the name of the game for Sanguine. If I don't see anti-heal on Radiance, I might, well, just blow a gasket behind the scenes. But we're going to be jumping down to Finch to take away game number 1.
Thanks, Goran Hindu. Let's kick off the final set of the regular Phase 1. It's Finch and Mifflin that are going to be here for it as Sanguine and Radiance battling it out for that first seed. Radiance, though, can't really shift much between 4th and 5th place, every way they end up. But for Sanguine, Miff, this is a big one, and they're going to get to have Shinto on Hell for this set. This could be scary if Radiance can't stop them from getting to that late game.
They have the tools to do it, though. Uller in the long lane, going to get a ton of pressure. Benji's going to have a very hard time getting forced out by Yarkor. And BMT's got an insane amount of damage output with a little bit of help from Adapting. This Hell can have a rough start. I'd say if Shinto makes it to level 10 unscathed, Radiance might have already missed their point of interaction.
It can feel that way sometimes when you're up against not just the Hell, but the Emoji too. There is so much sustain, there is so much shielding, there's so many of these extra chances for this squad to get the job done. Plus you can rely on a late game Jingwei to be your big damage output. Hell's damage is nothing to scoff at on its own. I mean, Yarkor has his own extra shield with that Nike there as well. Radiance are going to have to try and burn through all that before it gets to the point where it's overwhelming, as you just mentioned. But these junglers will meet, and they'll elect not to have too much come of it, just a little bit of trade of abilities.
At this point, it's always deceptive. You know you want to shut down Hell in the early, but levels 1 through 3, Hell is incredibly strong. She gets that stand switch, a little bit more abilities online. Her damage output is insane, so it makes sense to me that Radiant's going to wait till around level 4, level 5, before they really start to put the pressure on. They could elect to go towards Hell. They could also try and gank out Rongyu. That's a very easy target for Thor in the early game. Her mobility is very lacking, and with a Roar on this Khepri, an Abduct would almost certainly spell death.
Hey, we've seen games where Yamoja's, I mean, she's got good mobility with Riptide as Tings is brought down low but survives. Shinto uses the Aegis for an extra shot, the beads rather, and it ends up working out. Sanguine find first blood in a game that could potentially get them first place.
I said it earlier, man. You got to be careful around these Hells. Shinto knows the damage output he has. He's got the Mage's Blessing. He's already in the Lost Artifact. His damage output is insane. The Dark Stance Repulse did about 120. The 3 did the exact same. That'll shred just about anyone's health bar so early in the game. Radiant just step up a little bit too far. Hard to say that at their own tower line, but it's true.
It is a bit too much. I mean, I think Tings was really counting on that polymorph doing a bit more work in terms of buying him a couple of extra steps or maybe even another second where he could back up without taking damage. But that's why Shinto was willing to commit the beads to get out of that just soon enough to be able to find that extra damage on that Dark Stance 1. And Cyclone Spin even taking quite a bit of damage in left. But he is still A-OK. Aurora even still had the upgraded shell. So if Cyclone Spin needs it, he's got a little bit of extra help coming.
You can't sleep on Netriod on his signature Jingwei pick. It's been a little while since we've seen him on it, but the pressure in lane, we usually talk about the safety that Jingwei brings with the chain CC. If Rongyu finds a stun, Netriod gets a knock-up on the tail end of it, you can assume that at least 3 or 4 autos are going to come through. Just that amount of lockdown turns this lane into a pretty potent kill lane.
good damage from adapting onto Shinto, but not much more coming there. I feel like Netriod has kind of changed all of our discussions around the Jingwei, though, to go back to that point. I mean, I feel like normally we talk about how these Jingweis get bullied a bit in lane, how they have to wait till later to catch back up. But Netriod, when he gets this Jingwei pick, not only does he have all that safety that everyone else does, but a lot of the times we see him find leads over here on the left side of the map. He'll still actively take fights and stuff, too, so... Sure, there's certainly situations where he'll sit in the back foot, but there's also moments like this where they try to use it to establish some pressure. As Rongyu gets pulled back in, the axe combo is there, but even with the hail of arrows, it wasn't enough to find more pressure.
That's the double-edged sword you're going to have to really work with if you're Sanguine in this lane. You know that you're looking to fight in. You've got off to a good start. You got the poke war going in your favor, but Radiance still have an Ull over there. Not even bringing up the Khepri, the damage potential, the lockdown that Ull brings on his own is going to be very hard for Netriod to deal with. Once Aurora decides to leave lane, once Rongyu does the same, and it's a 1v1 in this lane, I think that we're going to see Netriod start to back off a little bit, wait it out for the late game, signature of Sanguine, just wait till he can group up with his boys and start playing that way. For right now, Uller is going to be in the lead as far as lane goes, almost certainly. He's got his beads available. Netriod doesn't have his. If an axe stance comes through and he lands the stun, Netriod's going to get forced out. After that, you're only falling even further behind when he's already about maybe a quarter of a level down.
Hard to beat an Uller in lane, huh? So Netriod had to make sure he's largely being cautious over there on that left-hand side of the map. But this has become Sanguine's identity, I think. Now that we've completed an entire phase of watching Sanguine compete at this SPL level, Mifflin, it's now easier for us to talk about some of their tendencies, some of their overall leanings. And that late-game skew that you mentioned earlier is a big part of it. It just feels like when they get to that 30-minute and beyond threshold, other teams can't quite compete with their team fight. The River's Rebuke does lock down Tings. He drops the Argus at his feet to buy time, but that's just too much damage point blank. But in comes the Anvil of Dawn. Adapting wants revenge, and he absolutely gets it. A 2-for-1 in favor of Radiance.
Almost all on Adapting's back. Yeah, Aurora was there, but it's only because Adapting finds the two-man dunk, instantly finds the kill. There was no time for the beads to come through for Shinto, but he uses them anyway. No longer available, doesn't even save his life. Adapting can keep running it down mid. That's the double-edged sword that is hell.
And this is brutal. If Panatom dies here, he gets caught by the Abduct. The hammer isn't enough to find the kill. Typhoon buys him time, but not enough. Adapting beats through it, willingly dies to the tower to get the reset off the Scarab's Blessing. And this is what a Thor can do for you in the early game. They'll need more of this same pressure from Adapting.
He's been doing just about everything that he can do at this point. The second he gets his ultimate available, he finds a kill in mid, chases down, gets another one. Aurora having that backup there is so huge. There's no way Adapting gets out of that situation alive, even if he plays it perfectly, barring a Scarab's Blessing. So now the aggression is back in Radiance's court. They've got a slight gold lead. The XP starting to sling their way as well. BMT's closed up the gap, and this hell is going to get slowed down just a little bit more. Already has the Shoes of Focus online. It's going to be hard to lock her down. The cleanse is going to be up a little bit more often. But that said, with beads down, Radiance has to push this advantage.
Right, I mean, and the aggression, I think, was always in their court. I think Sanguine found these two opportunities with this Hell to kind of bully this Hera, especially around the River's Rebuke. That's going to be a problem for Tings all game long, getting locked in by those Umoja walls. But for the most part, the Radiance should be the ones in control here, right, with this Thor for adapting. And I do think that that's been this case here now that Ultimate is online, and he's ready to start rocking and rolling. You were saying that there's middle lane pressure could be the answer, but it doesn't necessarily have to be here. If they want to bully Netriod, that's certainly fine too. Adapting has a lot of options at his disposal right now, Myth.
He does. I would say ganking anywhere besides solo lane should go his way unless Benji somehow forces out the Sentinel of Zeus on his own. But as I say that, blue buff dunked, Panatom dead, buff invade going the way of Radiance. Adapting is doing it all, man. It's the Adapting show right now. 3-0-1, 100% kill participation, and he's not going to have to slow down at all. Usually when a jungler spends this much time ganking, he's going to fall behind in farm, but already he's got the level lead. When he ganks, he kills the enemy jungler. There's no trade-off if Panatom's not allowed to farm.
Well, that has been the big difference maker, hasn't it? It's been that he's been able to get the enemy jungler with these ganks. Panatom getting caught by Aurora's Abduct the first time, and this second time was nothing but adapting. The red buff invade even coming through. A Cyclone Spin gets involved, and Radiance clearly coming in with a message. They do not want to allow Sanguine to make it to that late game that they're so strong at. See if maybe they can break apart the machine now before it has a chance to assemble.
It's a good strategy. It's one of the few ways. You know that Sanguine's waiting for late. Okay, let's make sure they don't get there. But the targets of the aggression haven't been exactly what you would want so far. Even now, Shinto's completely even with BMT. Sure, you've got Panatom behind, but on this Usano, he was always just a bridge pick. He's just trying to make sure that his mid laner gets to the late game. He's looking for that early aggression and maybe match what Thor can do. Sure, he's 2 levels down, but Shinto's doing fine.
Adapting has his beads forced out, and that might get in the way of some of this aggression, because there are some good control options that could punish a Thor if he's caught without the beads. Now, if it's the same thing we saw with that dunk on Panatom at blue, I don't know how much it matters that he has beads. Panatom, I don't even know if he ever got to look around with his camera, but still, this might be a little bit of a dissuading factor for Adapting in these next few minutes.
Radiance already has some anti-heal online, Brawler's Beak Stick, and Divine Ruin. That's a fast power spike, but Sanguine looking for their own fight.
They are, and that was even without the ultimate from Wrong You. It was just Shinto and Panatom getting aggressive, and boy, do they pay for it. Adapting again. Have we said anyone else's name even during this set so far, as he's 4-0-1 and just running things through the first 10 minutes?
He's doing exactly what he should do. Sanguine might be making it a little bit easier than it has to be. I mean, looking for the aggression there, they know what their strategy is. They're looking to farm up, play for late. They know Panatom's already behind. Moving that far up, knowing that the global ultimate is available on the side of Radiance, they have to just assume that Adapting's going to be there.
Yeah, I was worried Adapting might be on the back foot without the beads, but Sanguine, I think, took a lot of the risk out of it for Adapting by having that fight happen so far up. It's not just that they're looking for aggression, it's that when they make it an easier or less costly engagement for Radiance, it just seems a bit unnecessary, but they like this idea of trying to pressure big man Tings on the Hera Mifflin. They've been looking for it all game, and aside from those first couple of times, it hadn't really been there.
I understand the thought process. Hera is very similar to Hell in that it's a very immobile mage. Shutting her down is going to stop the power spike. She's very late game oriented herself, but you're trading off too much. The risk reward isn't there. Trading out Shinto's life at any opportunity for anything in this game right now might be the worst case scenario for Sanguine. They have a ticking time bomb in their draft, and right now they're not waiting for it. They're trying to look for fights a little bit too early on, and Adapting is just utilizing and optimizing on every single opportunity.
It's been a great start here for Adapting, and I think that that's a big deal, because there have been times this year and last year in Season 6 where it felt like Adapting was being a little too passive throughout these exact moments in the early game when they really needed him to step on the gas, and instead, here in this match, he's been everywhere. Look at Benji and Adapting waiting again to punish Panatom in the jungle, and I don't think that he knows wall, into the hammer, into the spin. Panatom, though, makes it back to the Tier 2, but that damage is still done.
If Panatom's just on the other side of that wall, he loses his life to the dash, but now Wrongyu wants to do some aggression on the other side. Aurora and BMT seeing what they can do, but the healing comes out from Shinto.
And they still get the kill. Big Man Ting's the one that gets credit for it. River's Rebuke will keep Adapting a bit locked in. He uses beads again the second they're off cooldown, so Netriod dashes in, tries to weave in the autos, and Yarkor has gotten involved to find a kill. Shinto finds one too. Netriod gets the kill on the Tings. He's low, but Cyclone Spin knocked up at the Aegis will not buy him enough time. Netriod with the double somehow turns it around into a 4-for-1.
Especially considering Panatom was forced out of that engagement before it even starts. Now he's half health because he got to rotate in after coming back from base. Radiant step up a little bit too far. Yeah, you're on the front foot. You have a slight lead, but that's still a Tier 1 tower you guys are under. That's still Sanguine's jungle, and the collapse was so clean. All 4 members, Wrongyu, Netriod, Yorkor, and Shinto were there to respond to the aggression. They play it well. They group up on the Hell, get the healing, and a Gold Fear on the tail end of it completely evens out this match.
It's huge, man. It's not a death blow, but it's certainly a critical one to take at this point. Mifflin, they should get to do some saving throw rolls. You're pretty good at those, if I remember correctly, so maybe Radiance can live up to that same level of excellence here at this point when it's most needed. But I think they got a little tunnel vision there, Miff, on trying to kill Wrongyu. He lived just long enough getting back underneath the Tier 2 tower and forcing that overcommitment, and Radiance got punished.
Yeah, my man was crossed out on his team bar on the left for about 10 seconds straight. I understand how tunnel vision can come through like that, but at this level, trying to compete for first seed, I think Radiance doesn't have the opportunity to give up these mistakes. Sanguine has proven time and again that given any opportunity, any small mistake, they will respond in force. all of them group up. Anytime that they can group up, that's Sanguine at their best. Radiance just picked one poor engagement, but they're still in it. We see that Shinto has even up the XP lead, but being 13-13 is fine. Panatom still behind a little bit, hitting his power spikes a little bit later on. The anti-heal is already online. Radiance can keep forcing fights. They just can't get discouraged by one bad engagement.
And remember, Yarkor was in that fight. He's 1-0-3 now because he rotated over here to that left side to be a part of it. And Benji did not rotate during that time. He spent that time farming it back up a little bit more. So he does have a slight experience lead over there in the solo lane too. There's a lot of things that factor into why Sanguine were able to turn that fight back around. And even though it has evened things back up in the short term, I think if Radiance can maintain that same pressure, there are still some ways where they can certainly still turn this one back into their favor. They still have the lead for adapting, as you already mentioned. Benji certainly could still be a big turning factor when he starts to get a bit more involved as well.
Benji's going to make it absolutely rough for Netriod to do anything in the back line, but now Panatom already in the lane, going to put Cyclone in the dirt, trades out the blink. Cyclone loses his beads, but his life as well. He might have to be worried about a secondary rotation from Panatom.
And looks like it. The rest of the boys are still over here on this side of the map as Netriod gets aggressive. He's dashing in. Netriod could be in some trouble, but he's got plenty of help coming too. Wall into the abduct for maximum CC, but adapting didn't have any ranged follow-up. Meanwhile, Rongyu still looking for big man tings as adapting takes to the sky. We'll see Rongyu coming into view, but there's just no one to hit. He'll settle for the wave instead, and Radiance don't get any answer back.
I really like the aggressive play from Netriod there. He dashes into the tower. He ults into the tower. He knows that he can do it because the rest of Sanguine are behind that tower, already zoning out BMT. He knows, worst case scenario, I go between the towers, I'm with my squad. Best case, I'm able to disengage for free back towards my tower. Nothing really comes of it, but Sanguine are showing that they're willing to fight at this phase of the game. It doesn't matter that Shinto hasn't quite hit his power spikes. He's also going for a more utility-focused build with this Breastplate of Valor, but they're still looking for engagements. Sanguine getting proactive.
They've really been leveraging this Yamoja, haven't they, throughout the early game? It's been really excellent what Rongyu's been able to do with these River Rebukes for the most part. When they've been on offense, a lot of this game has also been adapting, just kind of styling for 6 uninterrupted minutes, but kind of peppered in there were some really nice plays from Rongyu too on this Yamoja to try and give this Hera a hard time. They are trying to punish Radiance for going with this relatively immobile mage build. Once things group up a little bit more though, Myth, do you see that still working? The Khepri could kind of throw a wrench in that plan.
The Khepri will definitely make it harder to find the dive engagement, but what's Khepri going to do? He's going to elongate the engagement. He finds the revive, they reset. Radiance will have to regroup and defend whatever Sanguine attack after that, but Sanguine has the added benefit of healing. They've got this Yamoja, They've got Hell. The longer a fight goes on, regardless of how many lives they have to burn through, Sanguine's going to be the beneficiary.
Perhaps Radiance bringing not quite enough tools for these long fights. There's trouble in the backline for Rongyu. He was all alone on an island. He does have some pretty fancy waves crashing down, but they certainly will not save him there. A critical pick for Radiance, not just because Sanguine had a little bit of momentum going, but Rongyu has been a big part of that momentum, so they slow it down in the early, getting closer to the mid-game now and buy themselves some more time as Big Man Tings is going to be collapsed on Yarkor, making his presence felt here again as Benji is in the fray too. But what about adapting way in the backline? He's suddenly incredibly low. There is the Scarab's Blessing. He will get that reset, but Yarkor is not done. Blink in, cannot find that hit with the shield, but is still hunting for this kill. A good wall will finally buy adapting a little bit of room to breathe.
Shinto frontlined that entire engagement. After the pick, he's running at 2 members alone. That's what a Hell with a lead can get you. He doesn't have to worry about any of the damage because he goes utility, he creates space, and now Sanguine gets to attack gold. Radiance can't respond.
And Sanguine grabbed the Primal Fury, and do you remember the interview, Mifflin? Netriod sounded confident when I was talking to him, and I think that's what we're seeing here from them. He said that Radiance are a really strong team, but I think we're just playing better right now, and this is what we're seeing from Sanguine. This is a little bit earlier, I feel like, than when they normally start to be the ones proactively making plays. It feels like a squad that's recognizing where their power spikes are, and they're playing to them confidently.
I love hearing that too. Netriod saying that we're just better. That's so indicative of their play style as well. Sanguine doesn't do anything fruity. They don't do anything cheesy. They're not using Horus Ultimate to reposition on the map. They're not going for weird Gold Fury calls. They just fight as a team, and they do it better than anyone else.
This could be a bad situation. As up to the sky goes Adapting. He's found his target. It's Shinto who's low. They will bring in Benji to tag in and maybe keep this chase going, but Shinto has lived through it all. They have already letting it get to the point where they can't kill the Hell. Now Yarkor is right in the thick of it. Panatom gets the kill into Benji. Aurora is too close to the wood chipper. That is Netriod as Yarkor finds another. Sanguine ready to keep up the gas as into the airstrike goes the Jingwei, trying to chase down big man Tings, who does find a little bit of respite with the polymorph, but Sanguine are not slowing down. The slow is there from the Hell as Shinto gets another. They'd love Adapting too as Orangyu gets to eat. Sanguine starting to bring the pain.
Radiance just gets sucked into Sanguine's pace every single engagement. They get tunnel vision when they drop someone low. They forget that Sanguine has so much healing on their side. They re-engage after the healing comes through. I mean, Radiance, you gotta slow it down a little bit. Once a kill's out, you have to let it go. Sanguine returned quickly with 3 kills and likely a Fire Giant.
It's theirs, isn't it? Because Yarkor's zone is so strong. I was worried about this point in the game when both solo laners started to get a bit more involved in these fights, but the disparity is clear, isn't it? Benji 0-1-0 as opposed to Yarkor, who's 3-0-6. That's the Fire Giant, Pyromancer, and a handily won fight, all going in favor of Sanguine.
Take a peek at Aurora. He is 5 levels down. He's been level 8 since 13 minutes, which is already behind the curve, but he keeps getting dragged into these fights. He doesn't have time to be fighting with his squad, but they need the Scarab's blessing, so he's always there. He hasn't had any time to farm up. He can't do anything now. Now that he's level 9, look at his build as well. He doesn't get the Thieves. He's working into a Hearthstone. He's not tanky at all. Anyone that touches him, any form of CC that comes out of Sanguine, is instantly going to open up Radiance if it lands onto Aurora.
Yeah, this is scary now if you're Radiance. Remember how critical we made that early game for this Radiance squad. Adapting started off, what, 4-0-1? I mean, essentially, he's been 2-0, 2-1 since then. I mean, it's been struggles for Radiance and their ability to try to transfer that early game into the mid to late. Right now, Sanguine have wrestled control back. We rarely see them do it in this fashion, but they've been nearly relentless, fighting alongside Orangyu, punishing Tings anytime he shows up on the map. Now they've got the tier 2 tower in left, and they're threatening the left Phoenix. Someone has to back to defend it, but already it's in trouble. They're able to keep putting in auto damage even through the River's Rebuke as Panatom takes a little bit of tower shots. Now they've left Netriod up there alone, but they get the Phoenix. He retreats with the airstrike. Adapting dunks into the backline, but Panatom has already removed Tings, and Yarkor's not done. Sentinel Azus slows damn near everybody. Adapting does get successfully revived, but he cannot run far enough to get out of Sanguine's reach as he barely makes it back all the way to the fountain. This is a new type of Sanguine.
And Benji trying his best in the backline, but the healings come through. Shinto was at a quarter health just 20 seconds ago, and now it's Benji who's on the chopping block, dead. 2 members dead on the side of Radiance. Still, 3 towers left up. The Phoenix can't really be got to yet. The Titan not really on the menu, but Sanguine with this gold lead, maybe they try it anyway.
Maybe they are going to look for the end. I mean, we're 10 seconds from Tings being back. He won't have Argus, but if he is still back up, that's so much AoE damage that he will provide. Can they buy enough time? Shinto not even damaging the Titan. He zones Adapting away. The squad is still full HP. They can keep this push going. Yarkor does finally fall.
30%.
The Titan drops to half. It's incredibly low, but Radiance now have just about their full team up, and that is enough to push Sanguine finally out of their base.
I can't blame Sanguine for getting swept up in the momentum there. I was as well. But that's a risky Titan call with 3 towers still up. That means that there's so much protections coming through. Now Orangyu has to escape. Aurora on the chase at level 10, not much he could do. If Panatom rotates over, this might be some more kills for Sanguine.
Yeah, they need to make sure they don't overstep here. Do Radiance. In comes the ult. It lands onto Orangyu, and Adapting cleans up a kill relatively easily. That's good that Radiance were able to find it. Now we can take a moment here, Mifflin, to breathe. Radiance will be grabbing the Oni Fury on the back of this, but Sanguine are catching a roar. He gets a little too greedy. Adapting teleports to the hammer to get away as the rest of the squad still works on Oni, but Panatom is on the way. Radiance do grab the Fury, but Panatom wants to fight. Typhoon to chase down Cyclone Spin, who doesn't have the relics, and Panatom able to make it out with his life. The cleanse is there from Shinto as well as Sanguine find one more return punish.
I mean, it's just a cleanse, but it's still so impressive. Instantly, if it doesn't come through, Panatom likely loses his life. That's pure trust. He starts pathing back towards his squad. He says, Shinto, I need help here, and he gets it. The healing, the cleanse, everything that you need to, the return kills. Radiance do get the Oni period, but trading out so many lives means that they're not able to use this time to farm. They can't really do anything with it. They can't take any towers. All they've done is extend this game. The gold lead now 6,000 in favor of Sanguine. Left side Phoenix dead for a while. Fire Giant respawning in 50. Radiance is going to have a very hard time defending it.
It's going to be tough, and what more can Radiance do? Look at all this anti-heal they've got. The Toxic Blade from Benji, Brawlers from Adapting, Divine from Big Man Tings. It just still has not been enough up until this point. The Pestilence from Aurora, they have not been able to stop it, and so much of the healing does come in those small moments in between the fights, Mifflin, when they're regrouping, when they're waiting on some cooldowns to come up so they can re-engage. There's not a lot Radiance can do to stop that healing.
Well, they do pick up an Ankh now, but with Ankh, Radiance are going to have to win the engagement instantly. Only one on their side means that you only get the usage once. They have to use it and then spearhead their way into a fight, which is going to be hard to do. Aurora's the one with Ankh. He can't get in cleanly at level 12. Just about anyone's going to blow him up with just one ability rotation. His tankiness is slowly coming online, but it's been slowed down a lot by having to delay that Thebes.
That's right. He does have the Pestilence and the Sovereignty, so he's got the physical and magical prods, but maybe just not quite as much as normal. They lock down Aurora first. Out comes the Cursed Ankh from him, so he does get that value as he drops the Scarab's Blessing on himself. But what about Shinto? There is a assassin on his back, and the name is Benji, but he could not get the job done or complete the contract. Instead, Sanguine will punish him for it summarily for heading into their backline. Netriod gets the kill credit, and right to the Fire Giant goes Sanguine.
That's been the story of Radiance's life this entire game. Someone drops Shinto low, it doesn't matter who it is, then they tunnel vision a little bit too long. Sanguine says, oh, you need some help? Okay, let me drop my shell. Rongyu's got some healing, you can heal off me if you need to, Shinto. And they're immediately back in the fight. Now it's just a numbers advantage. Yarkor's doing a good job zoning off 4. Benji's left alone. Of course it's going to go Sanguine's way. Clean engagement. Now the left side Phoenix has respawned. It's incredibly low, but the defense potential is there from Radiance. Hera has a very easy time keeping minion waves out. She has huge burst potential off the form of any CC. Adapting can engage from just about anywhere on the map once it's localized to his own base. And Cyclone's damage, he's been having a quiet game, but he's hit level 20 and he's already got the Deathbringer online. If anyone takes any autos from him, they should fall pretty fast.
I think both of these side lanes have been a bit underwhelming, Mifflin, but that's why you're in that tier 2 seat. I think just looking at these slash lines, it'd be easy to say Yarkor is heavily outshining Benji, but has that been what you've seen? Has Benji gotten really an opportunity yet to kind of do the Amaterasu thing?
Benji's been doing the best that you can hope from him. He forces Shinto out at 1/10 health there. You can't expect that this Ama is going to solo out this hell with the help of his entire backline on her own. He did about as much as he could do, if not more. Yarkor is looking better right now because his team is winning. He's been able to create the space to allow Shinto, to allow Ronggyu to stay together in the back, make sure that Netriod stays safe. Benji's doing the most with what he can. When his team's this far behind, no one's able to dive with him, but he's still making value plays. He's still creating a little bit of time. It's just that Radiance as a whole hasn't been able to do much with it.
Yeah, I mean, if he can buy you, almost about 10 seconds, I would say, in that last fight where Shinto isn't healing anybody, he's just running for his life, then I really don't think you can ask much more from your solo laner than that, right? It's just a question of how can they capitalize on that time. Well, speaking of these solo laners, they decide to exchange blows in the middle lane. Benji now a bit isolated from the rest of his squad as Yarkor keeps him zoned out, but shouldn't be any real risk to Benji's life at this point either. The rest of Sanguine now grouped up and considering a push to the left side Phoenix. They've got 4 members here and Yarkor in mid. The left side Phoenix is the weakened one, but Netriod takes a lot of damage. Benji goes right into the Dazzling Offensive and locks down Ronggyu first, but no big follow-up. Sanguine still has some room to breathe, but there is the Typhoon. They knock up Benji, and Aurora takes a ton of damage. River's Rebuke isolates the front line, and suddenly it's time for Panatom to find the double. He's unstoppable at this point as Sanguine continue to surge.
Sanguine spot out the engagement from Radiance instantly. All 5 members disengaged so far. That's why we see Adapting wait so long in the ultimate. He had no good targets. If he dunks one group on Sanguine, the other's going to blow him up. They just play the fight too well, and Radiance play to the fiddle. That is Sanguine's disengage.
But now with the Titan at half HP, Radiance desperately trying to keep Sanguine out, but there's too much sustain, and Sanguine find the game they need to guarantee a top 2 finish.
That's not the standard Sanguine. That was 27
No.
minutes, and they were fighting from minute 9. They just continually aggressed. They made their dominance known across the map. I mean, Radiance, you had a plan. You wanted to win in the early. Sanguine says, well, we'll do our normal draft, and we'll win in the early. How about that? Radiance has no answer.
Well, Myth, I mean, does adapting need to do more there? I mean, it's hard to start 4-0-1 on your Thor, keeping down the other jungler with a 2-level lead and think that there's more he should have done.
That's the most Hunter question I've ever heard. Is your 4-0 jungler doing enough? Yeah, Adapting did what he could as best as he could. He created the only real scenario where Radiance can win. They said, let's win early. Adapting says, all right, bet, I'll do it. And Radiance didn't follow suit. Yeah, Adapting did enough. Could he have done more? Sure. Can I expect him to do more? Almost never.
Yeah, I think that he did plenty in that game. Just a question of passing that baton into the mid to late game, and Radiance didn't have it. That's game 1 in the books, though, and I'll get it back over to Gore for a bit more.
Well, Sanguine win game number 1, which confirms them top 2 going into playoffs next week. Now it's just a question of whether or not they can take over that number 1 spot. And hey, with playoffs, that means there's going to be a lot of SMITE action, a lot of stuff for you to watch, which means a lot of sitting around in your chair. Maybe your chair isn't that comfortable. Well, connecting all these dots, I have a recommendation for you. That is to go to needforseat.com. Go ahead and get yourself a Maxnomic chair. Use code SMITEMAX. You can even get $50 off. Use that to invest in maybe something else that can be relaxing. Maybe something to wrap around your neck, give you a little massage. Who knows? Who cares? Either way, it'll be comfortable and relaxing while you watch your SMITE games next week, because you're in for more action, a lot like this game we just saw. There was some early game control for Radiance that worked pretty well. In fact, it was adapting that worked really well. And then Sanguine just happened. I don't know how else to word it. They just did what Sanguine does, but about 20 minutes earlier than normal.
So Biggie gave the interview to us, right? And like we listened to the interview and he was talking about Aurora and adapting, trying to get on the same page. And the first 10 minutes of the game, you saw those two link up beautifully. But it comes down to picks and bans again for me. Big Man Tinks couldn't get a single thing going in the early game in that mid lane on that Hera pick. I was concerned about his safety playing the Hera into the composition that Sanguine had drafted here. And then we talk about the side lanes. Cyclone and Benji were non-existent. Whether they could get in the game or not, you could clearly tell they just couldn't. There was one moment around the 10-11 minute mark where there was a diving mid lane towards a tier 2 onto Rongyu, and it was the first time that Sanguine got into the game. They had a good fight there where where Radiance overextended and Sanguine punished them. And from that moment on, that's when we saw more out of the side lanes from Sanguine than what we saw out of Radiance. The casters were talking right about it. Can you ask more from adapting? No. But where were they going to find the transition point there? Gore? There was no transition point to have. You've got an Ool in the duo lane. Like, that's not a real transition point to the later stages in my eyes, especially if he's going power and crit and no attack speed. No offense to Cyclone's build, because I got the style of it, but he just couldn't make anything happen. And the Amaterasu was just completely nullified. He was designed to take on the Jing Wei, but he couldn't get to the Jing Wei because they were having to deal with the hell consistently. And all the while, this Nike that doesn't go with TP at the start of the game makes his impact known early. Jakor's player that Nike was so impactful in that game that gave Sanguine a window back into it, because Paditom did nothing in the early game apart from be another camp for adapting to farm. It's a great play from them overall, honestly, Sanguine, to show their team chemistry. Radiance, though, the best parts of this Gore was adapting on Aurora in the early game. Now they've got to work on the rest.
Yeah, the early game worked out really well. Didn't transition, like you said, towards that late game. I mean, there's a point, Mifflin pointed it out, that Aurora was level 8 19 minutes into the game. Things like that you can't really look over as being an impact. And much like a normal Sanguine game, the minute it starts turning into 5v5 fights, yeah, they had already turned the game in their favor by that point, but I feel like that was like the final nail in the coffin there for Radiance, unfortunately. I mean, there were so many times where River's rebuke placement from Rongyu would just lock down Radiance so they couldn't get out of there. And it was just a very similar, and I would argue, same story we see with Sanguine in a lot of these where, hey, they found their opening, they took it to the 5v5, and, well, they found themselves a win. And again, guaranteeing themselves top 2. Now the question is whether or not they can close it out fast enough. I believe a 2-0 gets them that first place spot, so they're looking one win away from being able to take that one down. So we might as well just go ahead and jump into picks and bans here for game number 2. I mean, where do you start changing things? Like you said, Panatom, it wasn't necessarily the Susano that opened the door. The Nike didn't really slam things down. What do you start to look at for Sanguine and try to strip away from them?
Well, to strip away from them, really, it was the hell more than anything else. That counterban phase so important to Radiance. They banned Raijin and they banned Mulan in that counterban phase. That left the door open for that hell pick. I don't think Radiance will leave that one open again. The hell just added that extra layer of difficulty to try and pin down this game as the game went on. Those cleanses, not just the healing, the cleanses were so impactful. I think Radiance made a mistake there in picks and bans, and I think they could admit to it themselves that they shouldn't have allowed that hell through. I don't think they'll allow it through the counterban phase this time round. We'll see if Sanguine adjust based off that knowledge of what they expect Radiance to do.
Well, so far, Sanguine are going for very similar bans all around. The King Arthur on the other side, I think, coming up a little bit earlier than he did the first time, but Hercules feels targeted. Merlin, well, honestly, it's a little bit of both. He's kind of targeted considering what we've seen Shinto do with this pick. But there's a lot that realistically, Radiance, it kind of feels like maybe they're going to adjust their picks more than they are going to adjust their bans. The target and the priority still being in the same place.
Interesting so far then, just same sort of thing, and I'm not really surprised. The first phase for both teams went pretty well for the most part.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to see too many adjustments in the first picks phase here. It's more the second phase I expect to see what happens there, but that Hou-Yi actually is interesting enough. That's telling me that Radiance are like, hey, you want Jingwei? Because you're playing Jingwei here, Netriod. No Hou-Yi for you this game. Unless you take the Heimdall. But if you take the Heimdall, you don't get your Moja. Sanguine had a call to make then, and Sanguine chose your Moja. I expect Radiance are going to instantly go for the Heimdall now.
Well, the Umoja definitely did wonders for them last game, so I don't mind them going back to it personally. But it is the question of whether or not that Heimdall is going to come through. He was banned in the second phase, I believe, the last time around. Just kind of thrown to the wayside for a lot of these teams, adapting. Well, you had said it. The cast said it. When it comes down to it, you couldn't have asked Adapting to do more. Put him right back where he was, give him the same amount of control. And there's that Heimdall you were looking for. Someone who's going to be safe in that duo lane. But man, late game, based on what we've seen in the SBL, he hurts. He is someone that you have to be worried about. And you can't really fight on equal footing. You need to have an advantage.
Wouldn't be surprised if Big Man maybe looks at this. It's an option flex for Radiance, I would say, with Heimdall going mid lane, is it there? But I know it's surprised to see that Jingwei locked in again now for Netriod with his god pull. Well, not his god pull is done, but his majority picks, he stays with just a couple. Jingwei, Hou-Yi, to name a few. And I think that matchup for for Heimdall in that lane, pretty safe for the most part, if it is going to be that Hunter there. I love that, by the way. Great call from Sanguine, because that is getting banned out in the counterban phase this time, Gore. Pick it now. Put Radiance on a clock of like, okay, the bad news for Sanguine is Radiance have a bit of a better chance to answer back to the hell now and maybe look at taking some things away from Panitom, but it has already given the idea of what Sanguine's comp's going to be, which is pretty much the same thing. Radiance now just need to adjust.
And I really like what Radiance have adjusted so far, not only grabbing the Heimdall, but much like that hell, grabbing and scooping this Khepri right before these counterban phases, because this was something that worked really well early on. Maybe it didn't translate the way they wanted it to, but I like that Radiance are saying, you know what, this was not the issue. The core at the beginning was not the issue. It was, as you had highlighted and was pointed out when it happened, the over-aggression that Radiance displayed. So maybe pulling back on the reins a little bit for themselves. They ban out the Nike. Raijin taken away from the other side, so maybe mid going to take some shots, but Big Man Tings has been more flexible these last few weeks, and maybe taking away the Raijin isn't going to hurt him that badly.
Yeah, wouldn't necessarily mind Sanguine to look at like an Agni ban here or another mid laner that's going to be able to apply Divine Rune from range a little bit. I think you leave the Hera up still. I think Hera struggled last game, and you saw why she was going to struggle with the composition that Sanguine had drafted, and with it being similar already, I'd leave Hera available. Afro, yeah, I can see that. You know, link up with a frontliner like Adapting or the Khepri and resustain them back up. It does make sense. I don't think I've seen too much of Big Man play that so far this year, but it is a shot in the right direction. I just don't want to see a Hera for Radiance this time round. I don't think it's the right call for them. It didn't work out well last time, so let's not go there again. But where does Sanguine go now in that solo lane is my question.
Well, now I'm wondering what Radiance are going to close out. Most of this team so far is the same as it was last time. Same thing for Sanguine. They have to change at least one thing, and it is, as you know, that pointed out, that Nike no longer available. So they grab the Osiris, which I'm not going to give the solo stamp until I see what's locked in. It's not necessarily something I've seen Panatom run, but lately it's honestly tossed up in the air. But Lord of the Afterlife comes with his own little anti-heal. I think he's got that good chase down. When it comes down to it, he does fit maybe a little better in the solo lane. It seems like Sanguine tend to agree with that one. Susano locked in once again. So they just shift up 1/5 of their team, but it looks like it's going to be another solid Sanguine game.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, I do think this Osiris pick is is a different flavor than what Nike's going to bring for me. I don't think Osiris is going to be as impactful as the Nike was in that specific game. But it is going to be an Agni for Big Man Tings. And I said Agni because I believe that that's one of the better picks for Big Man Tings to go into this matchup against. However, as we said, mobility is a bit of an issue, and he got caught out because of that. It's a very similar vibe with the same composition from Sanguine here. So seeing that adaptation from Radiance, I'm a bit more confident in their advantages. If they can get off to the same sort of start, I don't think we're going to have as many issues from Radiance here. But I am looking for the sidelines to get more involved. With a Heimdall there now, instead of this Ull, I do predict that Radiance should be back in the flow a little bit more so. Just see how kill hungry they get as the game goes on.
Well, this is why we like having sets. At least this is what I like. I love watching teams adapt in-game, but the adaptation from game 1 to game 2, changing and tweaking the little knobs is exactly what I've expected out of Radiance this entire time. And it seems like they've taken those notes to heart. The Thor, Khepri, and Matarasu coming back, and that Agni coming through. If you had to give it to one of these teams real quick, do you think Radiance has changed enough to turn this one around in their favor?
It's closer. I think this is a big game for Big Man Tings and Cyclone specifically. I think we'll see the similar sort of thing for Benji this game. I'm feeling Radiance, but it's going to be an uphill battle.
Well, we'll have to see what they're able to do here. Sanguine have already stamped their ticket in top 2. If they can win this one, they could be fighting for number 1. Let's see if they can do it here in game number 2.
Thanks, Gore and Hindu. Still Finch and Mifflin in the call, as Sanguine has indeed locked up a bye, essentially, into the quarterfinals at the playoffs. Now, it's just a competition for if they can get first. And I believe at this point, if Sanguine win this set at all, whether it's 2-1 or 2-0, that would be enough for them to get that first seed. So we'll see if they're able to grab it. Into that important game, though, Radiance have decided that they're only going to change up their back line. They've gotten rid of the Hera and the Uller. Instead, it's the Agni and the Heimdall, whereas Sanguine have only changed their solo laner. Myth, do you like that look for this one?
I do. I want to talk about what Wrong You just did there real quick. He popped his potion before he engaged, knowing that he was going to tank up the wave to get some sort of poke. That's a smart play. But to talk about what you brought up, I like what Radiance changes up in their draft, but a lot of the same issues, despite having a little bit more mobility in your mid laner, will arise. BMT still has no way to escape the River's Rebuke, and that was really what put him in the dirt most of the time in Game 1. In Game 2, he's still going to have to deal with it largely the same. Agni doesn't have a jump. He's going to get stuck there. And adapting, can you really rely on him to get off to such a roaring start as he did last game? It's not reliable.
Yeah, I don't know if he's going to be able to start 4-0-1 every single game, right? I mean, he and Roar, you heard Hindu talking about their synergy on the desk and the way they were kind of running around the map in the early game. But after that, it wasn't just that maybe Aurora, that adapting stopped being such an offensive powerhouse, but Aurora kind of vanished entirely after that early surge. I'm worried about him again on this Kepler. We know he can play it better, certainly, than that, but it's going to have to be a lot better than what we saw in Game 1.
I mean, that's a low bar. My man was level 8 20 minutes into the game. I'm sure Aurora's not willing to let that one happen twice. He should be fine, and now he's got a little bit more backing from Cyclone Spin. On this Heimdall, that lane has so much more fight potential, so much more poke potential, that really Netriod and Rongyu shouldn't be able to bully it out nearly as much. I would say so. I mean, when you have this Heimdall, you have the added ability to be safe, but he can choose his fights a lot more easily. If Uller jumps in, he's stuck there. Whereas if Heimdall moves up with his ultimate, he can just ride the Bifrost straight on out. So Cyclone Spin could choose his engagements a lot more easily.
I see. So it's the same amount of pressure, but it comes at a lower commitment, I guess would be the best way to say it, because the Bifrost can get him out of there, or maybe even still more pressure, but with less commitment. Heimdall's scary right now, man, but you have to deal with him in lane, and it really does seem like it synergizes to me, or relies on your ability to really make the most out of that third ability, out of that Bifrost, and that extra mobility that it grants you. And Cyclone Spin has looked leagues better, I would think, on this pick as opposed to some of the other ones he's played.
He does, but the matchup here with Jingwei, normally you like to see Heimdall look for the ultimate and immediately knock up on the tail end to set up some free auto attacks. Doesn't work nearly as well on Jingwei. She's going to be able to dash out of it. If Cyclone wants to get aggressive, he's going to have to make sure that Jingwei is a lot lower before he looks for that ultimate.
Right, the Galahorn knockup usually is pretty free setup for the CC chain for the Heimdall, but against Jingwei, might not be quite as free. So we'll see how Cyclone Spin looks to sort of enact that pressure here on the left side, if he does. I also really want to keep my eyes on these junglers, though. I'm glad we swapped over to Panatom, because last time Adapting really got the better of him around this time, through levels 5 through 9, from minute 4 to 10 or something like that. He really was just the dominant jungler on the map, but Sanguine were able to overcome it. Do you see things going that same way here?
They absolutely could, and it could be even easier to do. Agni's got a much easier time following up on a Thor dunk. You've got Rainfire at least 3 times from a distance. You can look for the dash to close that distance as well. Maybe there were a couple times where Adapting dunked in and Hera just wasn't in range to help. BMT can get in there pretty quickly now on this Agni. That said, Adapting's already up to a slight XP lead. Panatom's just now bumping up to 5. Adapting's been there for a little bit. But Shinto's been getting a lot more farm. Panatom hasn't been leeching nearly as much as Adapting has. Panatom's allowing Shinto to clear up back camps on his own. He got that red buff XP to himself as well as the small mid camps. If that's the strategy, allow Shinto to keep farming, Radiance is going to have to do something in response very quickly. They need Adapting there almost now so they can look to start shutting him down. Panatom willing to give up this much farm means that Sanguine's completely reliant on Shinto.
Well, another area I want to look at, Myth, is the solo lane. I think we still have not quite given your core enough credit for how impactful his rotations were back in Game 1. He was the one I think that really got involved in the fights and kind of helped right the ship so that then they could start playing around Rongyu a bit more. Can he have that same impact on the Osiris as opposed to the Nike? I mean, I feel like the Nike might be a little bit better at rotating in and having a big impact right away.
Yeah, the Osiris rotation in, he brings damage and zone potential. He's able to force people to back up. He's able to remove some of the healing from the enemy team. He can absolutely 1v1 just about anyone, but his mobility is going to be a lot more lacking. His engage potential is a lot worse than Nike's, and being able to keep up with his Amaterasu is going to be incredibly difficult because of the dash that Benji has, because of the speed stem that he has in his 1. If Benji rotates out earlier or rotates out first, your core is going to be playing catch-up the entire time.
Looks like that might already be happening as Benji takes an eye towards the jungle. There really will not be any farm up for him, so maybe he can take this opportunity to ward or something like that. But he does loop back around, come into contact with Rongyu, but looks like there won't be anything coming from that. Rongyu cannot find the lockdown, but that's not stopping Radiance from looking elsewhere. Now Adapting and Aurora are the ones getting aggressive and greedy, looking around on the other side. There isn't anything there, so Adapting takes to the sky, doesn't find anything with the Anvil of Dawn, but does get the actual wall, but Aurora can't capitalize on it, so Sanguine make it out of there without any trouble.
But they get through the first wall of defense, Radiance that is. Now Shinto no longer has beads available. Once Adapting's ult's up again, you gotta keep looking for it. You can't let Shinto rest. You can't let these beads come back up without punishing it at all. The defensive rotations from Rongyu have been good here. Panatom does a good job helping out his boy as well. But they can't keep doing that. If the first initial CC lands without those beads available, Radiance has a way in.
I like the idea, though. Radiance got aggressive into the enemy jungle, knowing that they still had that get-out-of-jail-free card, Cyclone Spin, just a bit off on stealing the buff. Does get knocked up, but has landed the ultimate onto Netriod, so should have solo potential if he could find the autos. Does use the Bifrost to keep getting aggressive. Now the Galahorn for range damage, but it just wasn't there, so now Rongyu is here to try and find the lockdown, but Cyclone Spin evades it yet again. He couldn't get the kill, but he does get out with his life.
Netriod playing with a bit of fire there. His beads were available. He just elects not to use them. Makes it out barely. That's value. No counter rotation from Sanguine means that nothing venture, nothing gain. Radiance doesn't really lose anything out on that engagement besides Cyclone Spin's ult. It's got to be frustrating, though, having Netriod play it poorly and then also get rewarded by getting to maintain his beads. Cyclone's not going to be happy about that one.
Some greed there from Netriod, but he does not get punished. This is a slower pace, though, than what we saw in Game 1, Mifflin, where not only Sanguine, but Radiance was also swinging for the fences during this exact timing of the game. And remember, it was largely a lot of Rongyu trying to lock in Tings on the Hera. It looks like the Agni has done enough to dissuade that. Even though the dash can't get out of the wall, maybe it lowers the chances of being able to lock him in there in the first place.
We saw last game, I would say that Sanguine was playing for counter-aggression for the first 10 or so minutes, and Radiance was just continually looking for fights. Last game, the first Thor ult resulted in a kill, then he got another one off the next one. Right now, Adapting hasn't had the exact same impact. Sure, he's burned off those beads, but no kills on the table for Radiance means that they don't really have much leverage to keep pushing the issue. They can't keep fighting in until they find some way through, and Adapting, still sitting on his ultimate available, has to wait for his speed buff to spawn as well. Shinto's beads are starting to come online.
He should have that safety net the next time he needs it. Rongyu is here, but he has revealed himself in solo, so no big surprise gank or anything to worry about there. But look at this aggression. We just saw Adapting teleport to Hammer on the map, so they want to get here as quickly as possible for exactly this. There's the dunk down as Netriod gets the ultimate off in time. Cyclone Spin is rezzed by Aurora, so he still stands, but even Big Man Tings is making his presence felt, but it cannot counteract Shinto. Burst blood for Sanguine, but Radiance answer back. They get a kill from Cyclone Spin that was desperately needed on a Panatom, but what about the continued aggression? Tings is stuck too far forward and Rongyu able to shut him down.
Yarkor was there as well. He got over there incredibly quickly. I'm not sure that it used his teleport. He just walked from lane. That's a big swing for Benji, and also a huge swing for Shinto picking up Cyclone Spin there. And that's exactly what you don't want. It's almost second first, same as the first. Radiance look for aggression, get shut down as Sanguine disengage, and Shinto's just picking up kills along the way. Now 2-0 and level 11, 9 minutes in. This hell is going to be an issue.
Yeah, I wonder if the Bifrost placement maybe got away from Cyclone Spin there, because the Bifrost took him closer to the Order side tower that time instead of further away. I mean, it's certainly possible that he wanted to reposition for more of a fight, but I also wonder if the most recently placed one was not an escape path for him, and instead he ended up making an avenue back in towards their tower. Either way, Cyclone Spin took a spill there, and Sanguine, it may have taken them a little bit longer, but they're right back into the driver's seat. Not certainly in control, but in a game where you're this skewed for the late game, you gotta be feeling good about this state.
You absolutely do. Sanguine might not have won out in the duo lane exchange. Yes, Netriod's slightly behind, just about half a level, but every bit that puts Shinto even further ahead has got to be so crippling for Radiance. They have to be ever aware of the fact that if they put aggression anywhere, Sanguine plays together, Shinto will get there eventually. You might as well just start the fight in mid then. Fight onto Shinto. Get that priority target out of the way early before the second relic starts to come online, before he gets some of that utility. Already he starts building into the Breastplate of Valor. Adapting's timetable to be able to get in there and 1v1 him and look for the solo kill is starting to dwindle. The second Breastplate of Valor is up. Adapting's going to need help to finish off his kills.
Oh, he sees Shinto and Panatom, but that's so far away. Yeah, there's no way he's going to be able to reach him with the ultimate. So the second Anvil of Dawn gets nothing. Plus, Sanguine saw it, so the Rivers of Butte comes out. They will be locking down Tings again with the Pokemon type advantage, Water v Fire. Tings, though, undeterred, has the dash and is able to escape. It's up to Yarkor to lock him down. Good Noxious Fumes should buy him a moment. Benji comes in as well, but we might have been following the wrong action. Shinto gets the kill onto Aurora elsewhere as Big Man Tings escapes, but still Panatom wants more aggression. Cannot quite lock down Benji, and instead Sanguine get away with another 1-for-0 pick.
I like what Yarkor is doing there. He might not have been able to pick up the kill, but he zones off. He forced Benji to use the Dazzling Offensive to peel. BMT can't get back in that engagement and help out Aurora out at all. Now we're 12 minutes in. Aurora's level 6, I believe. He's on pace to get the same exact treatment as Game 1, and Radiance hasn't slowed down. They keep looking for these fights. Radiance was really moved up into Sanguine's jungle there, and Sanguine just going to go ahead and respond. Aurora has to use his ultimate, no longer available for himself, and he just gets picked out for free. Shinto's damage is too high at this point.
This has been clean, though, from Sanguine in both of these games, and Radiance has played well, too. It just really hasn't been enough. I wonder if they're kind of giving Sanguine a bit too much in these drafts with all of this sustain and ability to reposition during these fights. I think that if the plan, is to be aggressive in the early game, they've kind of given Sanguine a lot of options to get away from that early game aggression.
They have. The Hell heals. Rongyu has fantastic disengage. The Cage from the River's Rebuke able to separate these fights incredibly well. And even if Radiance does find the aggression, if they get off to a good start, they have to burn through all the defensive relics. We see that Adapting's really the only one doing it right now. He dunks down on a Shinto. Shinto uses his beads, and then they don't do anything with it. Radiance is just letting it come back up. No one else is creating space for Adapting to operate here. He just has to do it all himself insofar as attacking Shinto, which just isn't enough. There needs to be a concentrated effort from Radiance to shut down this Hell.
I feel like a lot of times that second person is your support, but on this Khepri and especially behind, I don't think Aurora can kind of be that extra person. Sometimes Khepri really can. I mean, the Abduct, the ranged root, those can be powerful tools to pull out crowd control or to start fights off, even in the early game. But it really has not quite worked out that way for Radiance here so far. It's not for lack of trying. Aurora's had a lot of at-bats here so far, but Sanguine have just been a little too elusive, a little too slippery.
I mean, even in the direct support head-to-head matchup, if Aurora's abducting anyone, Rongyu can hit him with a ranged stun and stop it in his tracks, drop a River's Rebuke to separate the team. Adapting now under some duress has to go up into the air, makes it out just barely, and I'm sure he's counting his lucky blessings. Aurora must have been ready with the Scarab's Blessing. Luckily, it wasn't needed.
It did not come to that. Adapting didn't have beads for that little interaction. They only just came off cooldown. Now the Gold Fury started by Sanguine. They've got 4 members here. The River's Rebuke cuts off any chance of a steal, but Radiance are able to do it after all. Aurora able to right some past wrongs with a Khepri steal.
That's unacceptable on the side of Sanguine. You got 4 members stacked
Agreed.
up. I can't imagine that Khepri 3 did any more than 80 damage right there. That's so unfortunate, but incredibly fortunate for Radiance. Now they're about 1,000 gold in the lead. They're not in the clear just yet. We've already established Sanguine's draft is so late game skewed that at this point, I would already be accepting the fact that if Radiance were 1,000 gold up, barring a Gold Fury steal, that's fine. That's within the realm of acceptable losses for Sanguine at this point. They know that they don't really need to win out in early because they have such a strong late-game draft. Radiance are still going to have to do more to keep afloat.
Did you see Benji looking around? How am I suddenly surrounded? I agree, my man. Suddenly, Sanguine have 4 people on this side of the map. Dazzling Offensive does allow for some slight repositioning, but you will not live when Sanguine commit that many people to killing you. It's a question of what can Radiance do on the backswing, but the Fury was already down. I think Sanguine just kind of realized they had a window.
Maybe they were looking for Pyro and Benji's a little bit too far up. I'm sure he's spamming VFF in the chat because he's looked completely unaware despite having a ward spawning out at least 1 member of Sanguine there. They do get the kill, but they don't decide to group up on the objective. Probably a little bit worried about the counter rotation from Radiance.
They did. They were there in numbers, so I don't know that Sanguine would have freely been able to get an objective. It would have had to be a fight. And so I can't get upset with them for electing just to back off after getting their pick. But this is something that Sanguine has done well when they normally are in the back foot. We haven't gotten to see it yet this set because they've been uncharacteristically aggressive. But usually Sanguine is very good at finding these small ways to mitigate their losses so they can make it to that really strong late game that we know that they have.
They can. I'm so worried about Aurora at this point. Now 16 minutes in the game, he's still level 7. He already elected to not go towards Thebes. He did it from the beginning. He doesn't even pick up tier 1. Instead, he has Sovereignty, and it looks like he could be going into a Pestilence again to get some of that anti-heal rolling out, but he's not getting any XP. He's not able to level up. That second relic is going to be so huge for Radiance once these 5-on-5 engagements start. That Ankh is going to be crucial. Yeah. It's their only one that they're going to have as well. They need it. And Aurora can't get it until he's level 12, and his team's not giving him any opportunity to farm. Right now, it's just continued aggression from both sides, and Sanguine has been the beneficiary just about every step of the way. They've already closed up the gold gap that had begun to form, and now it's completely even yet again.
And this is in a world where they got that Gold Fury steal, and I mean, there's not really much other way to describe it as fortunate, right? I mean, if your Khepri goes in there, even with the best timing, you're not even getting an even coin flip, right? So very lucky that one goes their way, as now the Pyromancer being started up by Sanguine. Aurora looking for another one, but he won't get the same opportunity with Yarkor here to zone. So this time the neutral objective does go the way of the Order side team, but it just kind of feels like Radiance are up against this ticking clock. I don't want to make it seem like they're out of contention. By no means are they. They can certainly still grab this one, but it's an uphill battle into the late game with a Hell and a Yamoja on the other side.
Hell, Yamoja, Susano, I mean, all of them are going to scale well in the late game. Netriod's going to get his crit online pretty soon, already has the Wind Demon finished, so if he gets any opportunity to auto-trade with Cyclone Spin in lane. That dominance that we're seeing from the Heimdall might be slipping away.
Adapting, looking for a wall from range, doesn't get much. There is no Fury for another minute and 20 seconds, so this would be a fight for fighting's sake. As Benji gets a bit aggressive, does get rooted from range, but there will be no follow-up. Radiance, though, they're still looking like they want to find a little bit more action on the Order side jungle as they step further forward. Perhaps a red buff invade, as they will be there for the spawn, so Sanguine do lose that small buff, but that's just one in a sea of things that have been largely going Sanguine's way, so by itself, it won't amount to a lot.
Radiance would have had the numbers on the Gold Fury engagement had they chose to stay. Yarkor didn't rotate out a lane and does not have teleport available. Instead, Benji rotates out, gets nothing for his trouble, misses out on a bit of farm, and loses his tower. That's a small win for Sanguine again. And these small wins are starting to add up. 18 minutes in, that timer is getting smaller and smaller. This hell is rapidly approaching level 20. Already at 18, has the Soul Reaver online. The damage that was already causing trouble for Radiance is starting to spiral. Now 5-1 is the slash line. Gold Fury respawning in 20 seconds. If Sanguine's the first one on the scene, Radiance doesn't have very many ways to engage outside of a Thor ult. 18.5 minutes in, Aurora might be level 8 at 20 minutes yet again.
It's starting to look that way. He has really struggled to find his farm in this set so far, Mifflin. I don't know if that's because these early ganks they're looking for aren't quite working, or if Sanguine just aren't leaving any farm up for him, but either way, it is Sanguine starting to get aggressive. They can't get up to the red buff to contest, so they'll start to pull the Primal Fury. The vision from the Oracles belongs to Radiance. They certainly know that this is all happening, even though there's a ward there from Sanguine, and the Fury ends up being dropped. Radiance are certainly still local, though, so if Sanguine want to start it up again, it will be a fight.
Yarkor trades out half his health bar, immediately gets it renewed by Shinto, and they pull out the Gold Fury again. Any damage that Sanguine find onto Radiance is going to be so critical.
Aurora uses Abduct, so he does not get caught in the CC chain. Wrong Q is low early, but they lock in Adapting. He takes to the sky, goes up, because he cannot go to the sides, and cannot afford to land back down in this engagement. Instead, he goes to mid, and knowing they don't have to worry about the Anvil of Dawn, Sanguine pull the Fury again, but that's a ton of damage from Tings. Look how low Panatom is in the backline, and Benji gets the kill credit for it here this time. Now that he's stuck in the backline, though, his life might be forfeit, but Aurora is there. Tings has another big impact in the fight by shutting down Yarkor. Now Shinto is the furthest member forward, abducted back in, and Tings gets a double the Agni, making a big difference this time as Radiance find the 4-0.
Meanwhile, Adapting, the guy who was forced out of that fight before Radiance win it cleanly, 4 versus 5, yeah, he rotated over to Soul Lane. That's a tier 1 tower. Gold Fury now getting aggressed on by Radiance as well. Tier 2 under duress for Sanguine. If Adapting decides to stick it and just push it down, instead he's going to return to base, spend up the gold that they just got from this objective. Radiance show that they can win a fight. Everything goes Sanguine's way there. They poke out a little bit, they back up, they return to heal. Panatom's positioning, which is a little bit over-aggressive, and Benji immediately optimizes on it and punishes him.
And I think they're going to have to position Mifflin a little bit differently against this Agni than maybe they did in Game 1. If there's two of them a little bit too grouped up together, then those bombs are going to be hitting home. Panatom got ripped to shreds by them during that fight, and I think that now this artillery Agni starting to come into fruition here a little bit. Even without the Thor, Radiance are able to really turn that fight around on his head. You already gave plenty of credit to Benji for what he did in that fight as well. So Radiance now with some life, a small 3,000 gold lead 21 minutes in, but they're going to have to build on it now because the later this game goes, the harder the job comes for Radiance.
BMT already level 20. It looks like he's moving into a Rod with a Hootie, but Radiance want to keep pushing the envelope. They group up on fire. Yarkor, are you okay?
He has to use the ultimate to get out, so I'd wager no, he was not okay. He is able to get to some safety, but Radiance are recognizing the game state. They're the ones in control now, and they start up the fire. They want to force Sanguine in for a quick fight before they can use the sustain. Yarkor again takes a bunch of poke, but Sanguine are still A-okay with this for now. Radiance might have to decide sooner rather than later how they want this fight to go.
Sanguine needs to find someone to aggress on a BMT. He's been free casting in all these engagements, has been being absolute ruin for Sanguine. If they can get Yarkor in safely, if someone can get onto BMT and create some space, that's how Sanguine's going to win the engagement.
I wonder if that range CC is making things different as a big Rivers Rebuke comes through, but a 3-man stun from Tings. Barrel stuffs it all. Aurora still takes a ton of damage and will fall early, but up in the sky is adapting. He lands at the back line looking for Panatom. The spin is almost enough, and adapting makes it 1-for-1 jungle for support. And Radiant still have a lot more health on their side than Sanguine does, so they continue to aggress, looking for Yarkor, the Osiris that's up front, but they can't lock him down. Instead, Radiant head back towards the FG pit, looking to reset.
Sanguine are looking sloppy in his engagements. Panatom left completely alone in the back as the rest of them move forward. Normally these guys are playing so cohesive, so well together, but right now Radiance have been doing a great job of splitting up the engagements, forcing separate fights, and when the fight is separate and it's not prolonged as it has been in the past, Sanguine can't use the healing. No one's there to help Panatom out. He falls for free. Then the rest of Radiance can aggress on a Shinto. They have to spend the entire time running away instead of looking for return damage. Radiance are in the driver's seat again. 5,000 nearly gold up, and Fire Giant being burned quickly.
Started up by Radiance. Yarkor forces his way in, but takes a ton of damage. Lord of the Afterlife on the backline does put some anti-heal out there, but he was largely alone for most of that. Now Rongyu will fall as well as the Fire Giant does get lower, trying to force his way in is Shinto, but there's nothing he can do either. Radiance have now upset Sanguine and are the ones that control this game. They grab the FG and win the fight handily.
Sanguine walk in one at a time. I mean, normally I'd break down what Radiance did well there, and it was just being there. Sanguine just handed it over.
And Netriod looking for some turnaround shots, but there's nothing there either. The Typhoon for Panatom as Sanguine starting to get a bit out of sorts, and Radiance happy to capitalize on it. They take the tier 2 tower in right and use this deicide to start threatening the right side Phoenix. Sure, Rongyu is up, but one Yamoja will not be stopping this. The right Phoenix will come down, and Radiance might be able to go for more here, Myth. 24 minutes into the game, they're right on the doorstep of Sanguine's base.
But with Yarkor spawning in 3 seconds, they have to back up. There's so many towers available. It's almost a direct mirror of last game. 3 towers still up. Left or right side Phoenix down. Radiance have to back up here, but now there's so much gold left on the map. 2 tier 2s, a tier 1. They should be able to work their way into these Phoenixes incredibly well. Sanguine's defense is not the greatest. Hell has a hard time keeping people out. Her abilities are relatively short range compared to a lot of other mages. Sure, Rongyu could still find that wall and maybe look for an engagement outside of the Phoenix, but as far as just grouping up and using it as a 6th man, Sanguine doesn't have much leg in that race. Radiance's gold lead now at 10,000 with a Fire Giant. It's only going to continue to grow. Gold Fury spawning in 30 seconds, that's going to push it even further.
This is a big bounce back game for Radiance, though, because remember, there's not nearly as much on the line for the Radiance boys. I think when Sanguine came out of the gates this hot, it would have been really easy for Radiance to go, all right, we don't necessarily need this game. We're fighting the 4th or 5th place team no matter what, because we're 4th or 5th place no matter what. And maybe they could even roll over a bit, but Radiance instead found a way to really fight back into this composition. The late game of Sanguine be damned. Radiance are looking to end this one right here and now as they take care of the tier 2 tower and left and are grouped up to siege.
A slow back from Sanguine means that Yarkor is going to get forced out for free. The Phoenix is low, but now their numbers are here. Rivers Rebuke comes down. Benji's the only one caught.
He's isolated. This could be what they needed. Pulled in, but this is where Scarab's Blessing gets to shine. They can no more commit onto this Amaterasu, and she makes it out safely. Now Adapting can take to the sky, but there are no viable targets. Instead, he lands back with his squad and lives to fight another day.
Benji still has teleport. The aggression isn't over yet. Sanguine stops the first push, but they have to do it again. Now without the Rivers Rebuke. Panatom no longer has his ultimate. Yarkor no ultimate either. It's going to be very difficult.
Not going to be an easy defend for them, but Sanguine need to bend, not break, as Radiance have all 5 members piled up on this left side Phoenix. Remember, eventually Fire Minions will show up in right and start to threaten. There's the Frenzy popped on both sides now as Panatom gets deleted. 3 big shots, and Adapting finds the first kill. 1 member has been locked down by the ultimate from Cyclone Spin, and once he lands, it'll be an unhappy welcome. It's Yarkor that's sent to the grave as Radiance continue to push in with Fire Minions pouring in from right. They've got the numbers advantage too if they want to go ahead and look for the end. Benji dashes in first. The rest of Radiance are right there behind him. Netriod has pulled some attention on the left-hand side. He escapes with the airstrike, but Radiance certainly still in control. The Titan starting to buckle, and Radiance drag us into a game number 3.
2 quick matches. Radiance I really didn't think they had any way to win that game. How that starts off for Sanguine, they get everything that they want, and then just a couple misplays around objectives, a couple misplays around these fights, and Radiance absolutely blow them up. Starts around that gold for you. Sanguine just gets a little bit overzealous with their positioning. The punishment from BMT with that Agni from a range absolutely stops Panatom. Then they rotate over to Fire, and Sanguine makes the iffy play of just walking in one at a time. Sure, you're trying to steal, but yeah, you're going to steal and one member gets it because you're all trading out your lives walking 1 to 5. It doesn't make sense to me.
A bit uncharacteristic that they so heavily committed on that FG. You already highlighted Ting's having a better game, but what about Aurora getting way more value out of those Scarab's blessings that game? Benji looked better as well on the Amaterasu this second time around. Big adjustment for Radiance, and now we got ourselves a game 3. Let me get it down to Gore to break it down a bit more.
Well, Radiance decided to run a few things back, and they work out better the second time around than they did the first time around. It looks a lot better for them as a whole here in game number 2 for Radiance. And honestly, it even started off with Sanguine having a couple wins early on, Hindu. I mean, there was a lot that if you run it back in the first 5 minutes, maybe you tweak a couple things, Sanguine are in a position to maybe start taking the game away. But Radiance fought back in a much better way to the point where they started winning fights 4-0.
Yeah, and you actually look at the start of the game and where the initial lead that Sanguine developed came from. Really wasn't that dual lane, and it was Cyclone playing more aggressive on this Heimdall up against that Jingwei. And if things could have flowed a little bit differently for them there, I think Sanguine could have found themselves in trouble at that point too in the early game. That Bifrost right at the end, by the way, definitely a mistake, I feel like, by Cyclone more than anything else. They came back to punish him. But the adjustment in the picks and bans is where it came down to for me. Taking that Nike away from Jakor. Look at the impact he made on the Osiris. It was really non-existent. He couldn't bring the same level of problems to the team of Radiance this time round. And a lot of talk about Aurora this game and how he was underleveled. And I agree, he was underleveled. But a lot of people don't realize that supporters' jobs are to just be the bearer of bad news themselves in any given situation. And what I mean by that is if your team's struggling, you have to give up your farm as a support to keep the rest of your team on an even page and keep them going. And in the end, Aurora makes some very big plays in this set on the Khepri, where he steals away that first gold fury that made such an impact. But not only that, sits in the backline, draws some attention, stays alive, and gets some very big blessings. It was a very good game from Radiance overall. I do think Sanguine let it get away from them a little bit. I do think the Osiris pick didn't work out as well as he intended to. But my God, I've got to say one more thing. Wrong you, right? He can't play Umoja anymore. Not because he's bad at it. He's just too goddamn good at it is the issue. I don't think you can give him this Umoja anymore. It causes so many problems for the enemy team all the time. His setup potential, his usage of the Omni is probably second to none out of any other pro-level player I've seen play this god. He's great on it. But then you think about his god pool, it's Ganesha, right? So do you want to deal with silences? Well, I know Cyclone, for example, really doesn't like to deal with silences. So leave him on this one. It's definitely a weird trade-off you've got to deal with.
You're looking for what is wrong you going to control the pace of our game with this time. Almost every single time you let him get anything. And I would actually argue, much like you're making the point there, man, his Umoja, you don't want him to have it. It's too good, but if you give him something like a Ganesh, if you give him the Khepri, it just feels like the only things he would fall back to are going to hurt you even more and make it even easier for Sanguine. So maybe Radiance are going to have to target something out over there. And I like the fact that you focus, like we mentioned, the Benji had a really good set, well, a good game, I should say. Yarkor maybe not so much on the other side, so Solo kind of deciding that one, and then Aurora taking the perfect example of a support's position throughout that one. Not a lot had to change in picks and bans. They tweaked a couple of knobs there if you're Radiance. Well, now it's time to see if you can tweak a couple of knobs if you're Sanguine as we move forward to Game 3 here. Again, a little bit of weight on it. Sanguine maybe not sweating too hard because they've already qualified into those top twos, gotten themselves a guaranteed bye round for the playoffs. But it is nice to be able to, especially end your first phase, on a big win here for either of these squads.
And it is a huge win to find it for either team here, just to feel like have that confidence going into the playoff situation for both these two. Radiance will want the boon of their last game of the season being a positive note against a team that's been on the up and up all year, honestly, in Sanguine. Whereas Sanguine, they rightfully respect the level of skill that the Radiance members have on this roster. We're still seeing troubles for Radiance, though, but that last game was a really good look at how good they could really be, even at a deficit early on here. When Bigs and Bans come through here, I'm looking, honestly, again, at what Radiance can really change. My face kind of give you an expression of, like, what's going on here? Because I'm surprised that we see Sanguine get first pick every single time here. Radiance do get the option when they lose, and Sanguine get the option when they lose of who chooses it. And both teams seem to be happy with Sanguine playing Order side, which gives them the advantage of the first pick, but the disadvantage of not getting the last pick and that two-pick phase for Radiance.
And those counter picks at the very end, we have seen in the past make a huge switch up for a team. And finally, someone makes a huge switch up. I was wondering what we were going to talk about because I was just going to be like, okay, well, hey, look, Camazotz, King Arthur, Merlin, Hercules, a lot of things are the same here. But finally, I think Cyclone's been showcasing how important that Heimdall was, and I think Radiance also acknowledging how important that Nike was for a second time in a row. Both of those banned out here to kind of take away and show a little bit of respect to their counterparts.
Yeah, it definitely is, and that's the thing that we see about Sanguine a lot. A lot of these teams have already said that Sanguine play the meta, and a lot of people, almost find that offensive, but they just play the solid picks that they know are good and play them very, very well. So the problem is you can only limit 3 of those in certain roles, and you see what Radiance have done here. They've taken 2 shots at solo lane and Jakor to try and limit him. It worked last game because the Osiris did nothing, and then also that Merlin shot once again at Shinto. No real surprises there, but it does get Netriod comfortable. It does get Rongyu comfortable again to get this Yamoja. How does Radiance adapt is the big question.
And dealing with it is going to be important. There were a lot of moments where they were controlled, corralled by that River's Rebuke. The healing is always something to keep your eyes on. I was happy, I had mentioned going into last game that anti-heal would be big for Radiance. They had a Pestilence, Divine Ruin, Brawlers, and a Cursed Ankh. And maybe you don't need all 4 of those for a Yamoja, but you definitely have to keep them in mind. Uller, Thor, very similar to game 1 so far for Radiance. But now the World Serpent himself being hovered and locked in. Jormungandr was taken away a couple of times. It's locked in here for Sanguine. Is he going to be able to bring anything big for Yarkor, or is this a kind of don't lose lane?
Well, I think Sanguine already identified an issue there, right? Osiris couldn't get involved, Jakor couldn't make a difference. So what they've done is they've prioritized their pick for him specifically now in this phase. Now, it does mean that Radiance get to take a couple more shots at the mid laner in Shinto here and limit some of his god pull. So no surprise if a Hell ban comes through, I wouldn't be shocked, right? But what you're looking at is where else they could look for the bans here. Where else are they going to try and focus out Shinto, limit his options? I'm pretty much really thinking a Raijin Hell is where I'd be looking, trying to limit some of his options there and make sure Sanguine have to go deeper. Or his shots towards Panitom. But then again, has Panitom really made a big impact in the early games? I'd argue no. I wouldn't mind seeing him go back on the Susano yet again if I was a Radiance fan looking at the state of the last 2 games.
Well, you were calling for a hell ban, and they answer in kind immediately to get rid of that. And, well, Sanguine are making Radiance change up their gameplay. I think solo lane is recognizing how important they have been, or like you had mentioned with the Osiris, maybe how unimportant they have been, changing some things up in terms of picks, but grabbing that Amaterasu, or banning it away, I should say, is going to be big. Hebo banned out from Radiance here, which is something I feel like we don't get to see Shinto on often, but the times that we've seen him pick up that Hebo, it has been deadly.
Yeah, and I did say Raijin there, but then thinking about it a little bit more, I like the idea by Radiance to go for the Hebo, mainly to do with the burst. For the Capri player for a Raw here that's going to be looking for those blessings, sometimes it can be quite tricky to get that ultimate off and expect the amount of burst that's going to come through from the Hebo. But not only that, the control he'll bring does make it awkward for Capri to be able to get those ultimates off in the first place. If he's knocked up, displaced, that's kind of how you shut down some of those supports there. So I like the look, but it does still leave a safer Raijin pick on the table, which could be looked at, even though it did take some nerfs this week. It's one of the reasons I think it's fallen from grace a little bit.
Maybe not in the same shining light as he was in the past, but hey, it's not going to matter. They're going to lock him in anyway as it comes through. Discordia that is going to be on the other side here. And Discordia usually makes me think early game fights. It's get the damage on someone like a Thor, maybe your solo lane earlier, and try to get that passive going, and then spiral it out of control for them. I'm interested to see what Radiance are able to do with that one. But it's the Naja that's locked in for Sanguine. Not someone we get to see often, and honestly, not someone we see in the jungle too often, unless it's, Cheryu? I feel like not a lot of people pick Naja anymore.
Yeah, but good targets to really choose here. Discordia and Ul are pretty susceptible to an extent. Ul specifically, obviously. But take into account that ring bounce, right? It'll penetrate through Discordia, diving into a little shadow realm of stealth to survive. Yeah. You can still get those ring tosses off. Kepri's a big meaty target to look at. And honestly, this is what Panitom really needed. He didn't look too great on the Susano games. And you talked a little bit at the end there about the Discordia passive coming into play. Well, that's one of the reasons we got the Vamana pickup, I want to say, from Radiance here. Vamana will look to fight early on, especially against the likes of a Jormungandr in the laning phase. So don't be surprised to see Vamana get that buff early on. However, if Adapting starts off the way he did in Game 1, we could see Adapting get that Discordia passive too and look to run the show early.
That would be really scary. A 4-0 adapting was scary enough in Game 1. A 4-0 adapting with a buff on top of him becomes even more frightening to come through. But it's Game 3. A couple of knobs have been twisted here for Sanguine. Have they changed enough? I mean, the Jormungandr, the Raijin, the Naja, is that going to be able to slow down and maybe keep pace with Radiance?
Honestly, looking at these two comps, I'm favoring neither team. I think it's very even. But for me, I think it's going to be on the Ul. Honestly, this is a 50-50 game. To me, I can't make a call. I will say, it feels very get out, but sod it, I'm having a get out clause, okay? I don't know. I do think Ul's an important pick in this one. I don't think I've seen Ul shine enough this year to warrant him being picked as highly as he has. And I do think he's a little bit susceptible here to some of the dive potential that Sanguine have. Ul not having a CC immune ultimate is going to hurt.
Well, let's see what this Ul is able to do as he comes through in the hands of Radiance. Can Sanguine close it out? Or is Radiance going to turn this one around?
Thank you, Goran Hindu, as we move into the last game of phase number 1. Don't worry, the playoffs are still next week, so SMITE's not going anywhere. But it looks as though Sanguine and Radiance want to close this chapter on a pretty good note, as they are coming into this last game ready to swing. Are you worried at all that we're going to see Cyclone spin back on the Uller here in this game when he struggled on it in Game 1?
Man, I gotta completely agree with Hindu. I think Ul himself has been overvalued as the year goes on. His performances haven't really been breakout. The most value I've seen come out of Ul has been in the mid lane, and Dardes comes to mind. But in the duo, it's so hard to leverage that pressure that only this god brings when it's a 2v2. Rongyu is gonna be able to do a lot to stifle what he's trying to do. The poke potential isn't gonna come through the healing. I think Cyclone's going to have a hard time fighting through, but he's still got the backing of Aurora. This game's starting off largely the same. Cyclone taking some poke, Rongyu moving up.
It could certainly end up falling as Aurora continues to look for more, but Rongyu able to just barely evade capture, so to speak, by falling for first blood. Even though he does find the turnaround route into the knockup, this is what Hindu Man was talking about. Rongyu has really played well this set on the Emoji pick.
Yeah, I'm surprised he's gotten through all 3 games with it, but now that he's the only healer on the side of Sanguine, it's a completely different look. Having this Raijin in mid fighting in is going to be able to do a lot more damage come mid-game.
Adapting, narrowly avoiding falling there, but you were talking about the difference between the Raijin and the Hell here. I think Shinto could still do some work, even though it won't quite be that sustained.
It won't be the sustain, but the damage output is so much higher. With Panatom on Naja, the setup is there. Before, it was really Adapting running the early from the jungle role. Now, Panatom can look for ganks just about anywhere, relying on Netriod for follow-up, relying on Yarkor for follow-up, or even Shinto. Anywhere that this Naja goes, Windfire Wheels should set up a kill, or at least burn a beads.
The Naja setup is tried and true, and Panatom and Shinto's connection is also tried and true at this point, man. I know that everyone else has really played well for Sanguine, and I mean obviously at a first-place level, since that's what they're knocking on the door of. But I think really the core of this team is how well Panatom and Shinto seem to play in sync. And when you put them on a wombo combo like this, the Naja plus X big mage ult, like what Shinto has here for him, I think it's usually a pretty good recipe.
He's also, Panatom, got a very good matchup in a Thor. Berserker's Barrage, yeah, you could stop that. Oh, Big Man Ting trying to back up a little bit. Well, I'll just sash over to you, find the Windfire Wheels there. There's a lot that he can do to stop the aggression. If Aurora gets an abduct, if it's not on Panatom, the stun can come through, and now Aurora's looking like he's in a little bit of trouble. It's a very good facilitator support, even though he has this traditional assassin burst, and that's why we usually see Naja sometimes flexed over towards that support role. It's the utility that he brings to every engagement, that huge slow, the damage output, the healing. He can sustain up himself and stick in these fights a little bit longer. I'm excited to see how he uses it. I imagine both teams right now, Radiance and Sanguine, are going to be looking for early aggression in mid.
We've seen tons of early aggression this game. Game 2 is maybe a little bit slower. It was more around the 9-minute mark when things started, but still, the early game has had action here so far between these squads. And while that's not so rare for Radiance, they do love to fight early. It's showing some adaptation for Sanguine. I think that's what's really been so impressive about the back half of Phase 1 for Sanguine, is that they've started to diversify the way they can win these games. And it's really starting to make them seem more and more like a real legit contender.
I think it's in response to the fact that a lot of Sanguine's losses have come from just losing out in the early. Smite's a very momentum-based game. You want to make sure that you can stay in it as much as you want. Leaning towards early game as a team's a good idea. You can either win in early, get a very good chance of it, especially if the enemy team's slated towards late, or you could still fight in, like we saw from Radiance last game. Their team was much more early slanted, but still a couple bad engagements despite having an overwhelmingly late game draft. Sanguine lose out in fights at the 20-minute mark.
I think the Knights exemplify that play style, don't they? I mean, they'll play towards the early game sometimes around Neil or Cuvo, but their ability to just bunker down in the late game is unmatched. They really form this U-curve, the Knights do, in terms of how they like to win their games, and maybe Sanguine are moving in a similar direction here. Adding that in that beginning of the game is a nice win condition for them too, to go along with their already unmatched late game prowess. But I think Aurora is a good topic of conversation here too, Mifflin. I want to hear your thoughts on this, because he has struggled to find farm. Hindu Man was talking about this on the desk, that it was Aurora kind of putting himself on the back burner so the rest of his team could still find farm. What's been your read on how Aurora's looked so far today?
I think there is truth to what Hindu said, right? If your team is struggling, it's really going to be revealed first in your jungler and your support. Those are the guys who are going to suffer the most if every lane is losing. More so support, because his farm means less than literally everyone else's. That's why Aurora was meandering around the jungle so much. It's because he couldn't leech out the waves. All of his team was behind. He doesn't want to take anything for himself. That said, falling as far behind as Aurora did in both game 1 and 2 is a bit of an overstep. Being level 8 20 minutes in can almost never be justified unless you win, and Radiance did in game 2.
That's right, still finding a way to get it done. Some of those Scarab's blessings were pretty nuts, whether or not he was that far behind into the game, so Aurora's still oftentimes able to squeeze out every bit of value from a tough situation that he can, so great work from him in the back half of that second game, despite some of those early troubles. And that's the thing, I think, with Aurora. He has a very tightrope walking style, because he's so aggressive in the early game. So sometimes he'll fall off, but it's his ability to get right back up there and then just walk all the way across in the next 5 games in a row that makes him so consistently a top-tier performer.
You bringing up his aggressive playstyle is a question mark for me in this set, right? Why is he going to Khepri 3 games in a row? The facilitator factor is there. That Scarab's blessing is really good, but he could have looked towards a warrior. He could have even looked towards an assassin. He could have tried to take the Yamoja for himself if Radiance ever went for the first pick. I think that Aurora's getting forced into this Khepri pick as a direct response to Sanguine's playstyle. We see that Radiance are forced into diving very deep in these early game engagements, having that safety net of Scarab's blessing. If Adapting wants to go into a tier 2 tower, if he thinks he can get a kill, he knows that Aurora's there, and he could just save his life.
It's an interesting take on it, right? If their read is that they do still want that same early game aggression, then it might seem weird to go to the Khepri instead of a warrior, but doesn't this sort of enable that early game aggression, just as we were saying? But it all kind of relies on adapting. That's why in game 1 things look so bad, because they chose to give up Aurora's usual aggression to enable adapting to go as far in as he needed to. It's just that he wasn't quite able to transfer that into the mid to late game for them. In game 2, on the other hand, it was working just fine for them, especially around those curious fire giant fights for Sanguine. So it's an interesting approach. Obviously, we don't know exactly how Radiance are reaching these conclusions, but just some possible ideas for why we might be seeing some of these picks.
Man, I could see Aurora right now if he's watching back the broadcast. He's just going to say something along the lines of, Khepri's good. And you know what? He's just right. He's a fantastic facilitator CC. You get a ranged engagement, you get the abduct, you get to revive your team. I mean, what more do you want from a support? I can't think of much, unless you're Aurora, then maybe Hercules comes to mind. but I like the playstyle so far from both squads. Sanguine reprising their slow and true style where they just wait it out till the late game, make sure Shinto gets some farm. Already we're starting to see a level disparity grow there between the mid laners, one level up on the Raijin. But this game, for the first time, Radiance has been able to farm up very effectively, and Aurora's been able largely to keep in par with Rongyu's farm.
Dude, I love when my favorite band evolves and they develop a new sound, but you still need to be able to crush the OG stuff, right? Dance Dance still needs to pop when that comes up. That's obviously Fall Out Boy, the best band in the world. And so that's why I love seeing Sanguine being able to still go back to some of their old tracks. Yeah, we saw the new Sanguine a bit with the early game aggression in games 1 and 2, but this is vintage Sanguine, right? This is getting back to those first few albums from them when they were able to play really, really patiently throughout this exact time of the game and stifle any opportunities where you looked for aggression. That hasn't come up just yet. Radiance have played it relatively slow, but this is Sanguine still getting right back into their comfort zone, as you said.
Yeah, I am confused by the pace coming out of Radiance. Adapting's hitting that critical power spike where Thor is probably the strongest god in the game right now. At level 9, he's already got a lead. He can start looking to get aggressive. There are fantastic targets all over the map. Rongyu might be the easiest person to single out right now, considering Shinto actually has a pretty nice jump this time. Sure, you could still burn his beads and look for the same engagement like you were on that Hell, but Rongyu's almost a sitting duck with no mobility. If Adapting ever finds a dunk, he might just get himself first blood.
It's still available 9 minutes in, as we have not had any kills up until this point. I know that you're surprised about Radiance playing it slow, but are you surprised that this is the first game where Sanguine take it slow? Because it's perhaps the game where they have the least claim to the late game. They're certainly still going to be good in it, but it's not Hell and Yamoja good at this point here when they finally elected to take a slower pace.
If it were any other team, I would be surprised by the slow pace of this Naja in particular, but I know what Sanguine want. They don't care about if their team's late game slanted. They want to group up as 5 and play together as a team, so they're always looking for that phase of the game. Once you're done farming, group up as 5, that's Sanguine's time. It doesn't matter what they drafted, it doesn't matter where they're at, they're always looking for it. So I think saying that Sanguine might be a little bit confusing on this pace, not for me.
You know, it's interesting. They had that set where they played against the Kali, Aphrodite, Khepri, and still were the better late-game team, even considering the draft. So perhaps there's something to it, as Benji has now been caught out. He still has the Colossal Fury, though, and there's the big baby. Ooh. So how much trouble can he be in? Instead, it's Panatom who's low, but Benji just out of range for those autos, so Panatom able to make it out.
A little bit of hesitation there from Benji to chase out that kill. Maybe he didn't know that the Umbrella Ring was going to hit Panatom on the way back, but the second it did, we saw Benji start to move forward, see if maybe he could get a return kill or at least force out Panatom's ultimate. Luckily, he doesn't lose his own life, Panatom, and Benji really only trades out his ultimate, which means that, sure, he's open to another gank if Panatom wants to rotate back through, but as far as just the lane matchup goes, yeah, Yarkor is not killing of a mana on Jormungandr.
No, and I don't know how much coming back over here to gank this level 12 Vamana, how good that feels anyway, right? So when that opportunity kind of dematerialized, we might not see a whole lot from it. I mean, we certainly could. Saying it could be a bit hard to predict in that regard, but Vamana relatively safe even without the ultimate. As this is another thing, though, since we're talking about solo, to talk about this Celestial Legion helm really has become the new de facto starting item from Jormungandr's kind of across the league in a world where they can't get Jade Emperor's Crown anymore. And I think this really is just that next best option for you when you deal magic damage, but you're worried about taking physical damage.
It's a much faster power spike than what we used to see as well. He's going to be able to rotate out and use that item very early on because of how cheap it is. So if the Gold Fury gets started up from either squad, you got to believe that Yarkor is going to be world serpenting his way into the midst of the entirety of Radiance. And that protection stack is going to be so important for him.
It is going to be big as Adapting takes to the sky. Shinto might reveal himself for a moment, but there's just nothing there. Look how far back into their own jungle Sanguine were at that point, so there just weren't any opportunities for Adapting to find a dunk. And it's not the end of the world for them. Radiance can certainly come into the mid to late game with this draft and hope to win, but just a bit unfortunate they haven't been able to get more out of the Thor up until this point, when usually he's so good in the early.
I agree. The weakness of Thor, when people say that he falls off as the lane or the game goes on, it's not even that his damage is really getting worse. It is, but he still deals enough. It's the fact that if he dunks in, he might lose his life. With a roar, not an issue.
Adapting, still in trouble way in the back, but Aurora was patient, does eventually drop that ultimate, and that has left Rongu in the back to take a ton of damage, and Benji's on his way to collect, to get first blood on the Rongu 12.5 minutes in. And even though Netriod's hitting all his shots, they don't do that much damage to Benji, who drops the Colossal Fury and looks to keep up the chase. Aurora can't quite connect, so there will be no more action in the middle lane, but Benji continues to look in the jungle.
Dude, I love that stop on the first ability from Benji. He just immediately avoids the Raiju, stops his aggression in his track, realizes, okay, I can't get much here. Let me go ahead and steal away these back camps, see if we can find some farm. Radiance's rotations this game have been so good. Anytime Sanguine moves up at all, Radiance is constantly looking for the aggression. That's why Adapting goes up in the air, but Sanguine's playing so far back he can't do much. They notice that the Thor ults down, Sanguine moves up, Radiance says, all right, you fell into my trap, time for me to find that first blood, and Benji gets it looking so clean.
And remember, the relative difference in those dives is not a whole lot, because Yarkor, in every other scenario except this one, would have killed Adapting, but Radiance have this Khepri that enables that early game aggression. So both solo laners dive the tier 1 to look for a kill, and it would have even been a more valuable one for Sanguine if they could have gotten it onto Adapting, but the Scarab's Blessing making a big difference there for Aurora, and instead it's only Rongu that ends up falling.
You know, I know what it is about Khepri that bothers me. He embodies everything that I hate. If you play it perfectly, you find your kill, he will punish you for doing it. Now Yarkor is out of position, having committed World Serpent to the tier 1 tower. What are you going to do? You just think that he's going to come back to life? I guess you have to be aware of it. Aurora makes it out of the River's Rebuke just barely. That's a wasted cooldown by Rongu.
Still a little bit behind in terms of experience is Aurora. That's been a trend so far this set, and 3 games in a row makes me think he must be giving a little bit of this farm away, because we know my man can find it elsewhere. Cyclone Spin does good work to force out the beach from Panatom, so Adapting knows he has a target, locks Panatom down, and gets the second kill of the game for Radiance.
Radiance is just hitting their pace a little bit more, and the chase is still on. Return damage from Shinto might dissuade them a bit, but Gold Fury is available, and Panatom's dead for 20 full seconds. Radiance hasn't used too much of their health bars yet, and they've got the Oracle Vision. They absolutely have the advantage here.
With all 9 alive players here at the Gold Fury, Radiance should be feeling pretty confident. Rongu gets locked down in the front line and takes a ton of damage. Yarkor will try and take up the mantle and step forward. Does still have that World Serpent, but doesn't have it forced out. Radiance, after all that, don't feel comfortable doing the Fury. So I know Sanguine lose 2 lives, but I get the feeling that could have gone a lot worse.
It absolutely could have. Sanguine just do barely enough to dissuade from Radiance from sticking around. Panatom respawns. Radiance says, okay, no risky fights here. It's set life. 1-1 is the best of 3 right now. So might as well back off. Take the slight lead that we have now. Nearly 1,000 gold up. Radiance can keep fighting in. They don't have to worry about that ticking time bomb that they had to in the last 2 games. Sanguine's draft is good in the late game, but it's not so much better than Radiance's that it should really affect their playstyle.
Right, Radiant should be really happy with this current pace of the game. The only thing you have to be worried about now is just Sanguine's passive kind of outside of the game, in that they're strong in the late game. I don't think they have a real big measurable advantage composition-wise going late. I mean, obviously the healing from Yamoja will be difficult to deal with, and you love the Raijin Jingwei scaling into the late, but a lot of that is true for Radiance, as they're considering starting up another Gold Fury. And again, Rongu taking a ton of poke as Big Man Tings looks good. Aurora is taken up to the sky by Panatom, lands back down into the damage, but is able to use the Scarab's Blessing on himself. So Adapting goes to the back line. Netriod gets the kill into Aurora, but Adapting gets the double. Panatom and Rongu both end up pushing up daisies as Netriod wants to get aggressive, dashing for Cyclone Spin, but cannot find the kill. Instead has to airstrike defensively as Benji stomps on Shinto in the mid lane. That's another 3rd kill for Radiance.
Panatom starting off that fight with a Naja ult onto a Khepri. I mean, what is he expecting there? No one's going to be able to do enough burst damage with first tick to make sure that Khepri can't get the Scarab's Blessing off. Adapting immediately dives into the back while the rest of Sanguine are just looking at Khepri in the sky. Just a little bit of a question mark. I mean, you could have hit anyone else with that target, or just not hitting someone with the ultimate from Naja would have been better there, and instead, Radiance do exactly what they need to. Naja ultimate's down. All right, let's go. Adapting dives into the back, picks up 2 kills cleanly. They don't get the Gold Fury on the tail end of it, but this lead is continuing to grow.
It is, and this is where that patient playstyle from Adapting looks so strong, because as soon as Sanguine finally sort of blink, in that staring contest, then that's when he pulls the trigger. Wrong You must have been blinking too, as he gets blown up by Tings and a roar, and now the Gold Fury started up by Radiance. It's already down below 1,000, and nothing Sanguine could do to stop it. This set has been so back and forth with so much early action, but here in Game 3 it's been slow, and suddenly Radiance have full control.
The entire time, it seems like Radiance is playing Sanguine's game, and they're doing it slightly better here. I mean, the early game was slow. That's almost always been Sanguine's MO, but Radiance get to these engagements with a slight edge, and I think a lot of that's due to Benji's rotations. He's been getting so much value every time he leaves this lane. He's the real difference maker in these engagements. And then Adapting, finding huge dunks, setting up the kills. I mean, a lot's going Radiance's way. Right now, Sanguine's only way back in is to group up like they want to do normally and play better, but they have to play into a nearly 5,000 gold deficit at 18 minutes in, with all of their towers available except for one in the duo. If Radiance pull even a little bit further ahead and they start to work their way through the towers, they start to pull this Fire Giant, this game could be blown wide open instantly.
And as well as Benji's played, I really think the big difference maker has been the Khepri here this time, as Shinto is able to just barely get out of trouble. Panatom locked down as well. But Sanguine have struggled to play around this revive, the Scarab's Blessing, correctly, I feel like, at times here, Myth.
Yeah, they haven't split the engagement. Aurora's gotten absolutely huge value out of every single one. The aggression from Sanguine's only ever been enough to get one pick, and one pick's not enough when Khepri's on the enemy team. You got to continue fighting in. You got to look for the damage off the revive, and so far, Sanguine hasn't found it.
Instead, in that time when someone is being revived, Adapting has thrived, hasn't he? He's been able to use that window to find all of these picks. Benji, too, and it's really made life hard for Sanguine in that backline. They are grouped up, though, to defend around this Fire Giant if need be. Radiance, though, starting to build far games in this. Like there was an issue. Don't worry, we'll get started working on it out there for you, Smite fans. But this has been a much better look for them. I'm identifying this Khepri as the big problem, but I know you were saying it was the Vamana. Do you feel like one of them has done a little bit more here this time, or has it been the two working together?
I would say that Aurora has done the most to mitigate loss, which I guess is kind of a non-answer. That's what Khepri's looking to do, but he's getting so much value off of it. Sanguine hasn't been able to get any foothold. Yeah, they're doing both of their jobs equally. Everyone gets a participation prize. I think that Benji's might look better on the screen, right? He's getting kills, he's getting gold, whereas Aurora is a little bit more behind the scenes. He's keeping his team alive. He's doing a great job facilitating. I'd say so far, Radiance is looking better across the board.
Yeah, it's an interesting sort of question, though, isn't it? I think that it is maybe Benji doing more to break the things positively that Sanguine are doing, whereas when Aurora's Scarab's Blessing goes well, it feels a bit more like Sanguine are failing to play around the mechanic correctly, right? Maybe that's just a different in ways of interpreting how those things work well when they're done well. I don't know if that's making a whole lot of sense, but yeah, maybe that's my read on it.
I mean, it's a hard question to answer, right? It's like, which one's more valuable in general, support or solo? I mean, we can't answer that. I'm not smart enough myself. I think what we have to look forward to in this game, what really we have to keep our eyes on, is this first Fire Giant. If Sanguine get it with the lead that Radiance has already, I think that maybe they'll be able to close up the gold gap a little bit. They might be able to get some of the Tier 1 towers. I think Tier 2s are going to be a bit of a hard ask for Sanguine. If Radiance get this first Fire Giant, I'm going to go ahead and call it a GG there. I mean, the gold lead's already in favor of Radiance. The towers are nearly dead. If they get a Phoenix off the tail end of that, Radiance at this deficit with the team comp that they have, going to have a very hard time fighting into it.
Well, the core question now for Sanguine is the one that you raised, which is how are they going to kill more than one person? Because just getting one person down the kill threshold is not enough against Khepri. And that question only gets harder to answer the further ahead that Radiance get, right? So that's what makes this next Fire Giant that you've been highlighting already so important. If Radiance get further out of control, then I don't think Sanguine do have a way to start trying to blow past that Khepri res and maybe finding a couple more members on respawn.
A lot of that issue is born from the fact that Sanguine's comp doesn't have multi-man engage. You're looking at Yamoja, you can reliably hit maybe 2 people at 1 usually with the stun. Naja, all single target CC. You got the sash, you got the ultimate, and then the follow-up has to be ready to get there. Meanwhile, the entire time all this single target CC is going on, it gives time for Aurora to line up the Kepri's blessing, or the Scarab's blessing rather. It comes from Kepri, we can call it that. I think it's just a matchup dependent right now. Sanguine might have got outdrafted by just the Kepri. So much single target on their side means that Kepri's only always going to get value.
I do think that this Naja is starting to kind of hit the wall, isn't it? It's struggling in terms of finding additional value. And you mentioned earlier, it's not like they have something like a Ra or a Kuku Khan. That damage comes out so quickly, it's so bursty, that maybe the Kepri can be a viable target on the back of that Windfire wheels from the Naja. But in this case, when the damage is a bit slower, every single time Aurora's going to have room to ult himself and get out of whatever trouble it is.
Yeah, you got to hit the taiko drum 4 times, man. It's not that same level of burst. Sure, it might be more damage overall, but when you're trying to shut down someone instantly, that's not the answer. Right now, Yarkor moving up to the Fire Giant, and it seems like Radiance already have the Pyro pulled. I hope they don't do the same as last game and walk in one at a time.
Well, whatever they do, Panatom won't be a part of it. He's been removed instantaneously. So Sanguine step on the gas. Taiko Drums comes out, but adapting gets to the skies in time. Cyclone Spin is revived as well. A huge stripe gets the beads out from Shinto, and Yarkor has to regroup with the squad, but Benji was waiting in the back line to blow it all up. Ends up falling right away, does Yarkor, and Sanguine are fully on the retreat. But I don't think adapting is. Shinto gets a kill off the back of the Thunder Crash to make it 2-for-1.
But Benji's not done just yet. Wrong you under the tower, big baby. Yeah, that's AoE auto, son. You're not going to be able to escape that one. Netriod on the chase. No help yet. BMT starts his rotation in. Seems like Benji's going to make it out there. And if I think I saw it right, Shinto stole that Pyromancer with the ultimate. It's not a great value for them. They trade out a majority of their lives, and the lead is still going to lean in towards of Radiance now. But that's nice. It's one way to stop the bleed from expanding even further. Fire Giant, though, still on everyone's mind.
It is, but Sanguine have bought them themselves a little bit of time to breathe. I mean, Radiance's pace was pretty breakneck up until this point, and Radiance were getting pulled in every direction. Now they'll have a moment where everyone can kind of reset, find a little bit of farm, and get back in position to make sure they're ready for this Fire Giant. Down 5,000 gold, Mifflin. It's certainly not a favorable fight, but I don't think they're going to get a more favorable fight. They probably have to come out and try and contest this FG, as Big Man Ting shows just how much damage he has. Wrong you gets put down to critical condition, but Tings has been caught in the web by Panatom, and that was too much. Roar wasn't able to find the Scarab's Blessing. He didn't have it up, which meant they were able to complete the kill.
Now 50 seconds left on the spawn. Sanguine doesn't have enough gold now to look at Fire Giant, but they can look at these neutral objectives, the permanent objectives inside the Tier 1 towers. You might want to try and poke out mid. You can go over towards right. They got plenty of ways to work their way in, and they've got time to work with. Right now, that's the best way Sanguine can find the engagements. If Aurora's ultimate's down, yeah, we got to fight. That's the time. We're all single target. Might as well leverage it now. Now, Radiance have to play defense for the first time this game. Sanguine's siege is strong, but with so many ultimates down, they have to back up.
It's probably good they did. Benji would have had a great line to catch them out if they'd committed underneath that Tier 2 tower, kind of rotating in from the back. So Sanguine think better of it, back up and give themselves a chance to fight another day. They clearly have the damage to make this Naja combo work. It's just the Scarab's Blessing has been such a thorn in their side, and they finally got to have a fight where they didn't have to worry about it. Red buff invaded by Radiance, and Sanguine can't punish them on the back of it.
Benji does trade out his blink there, but Sanguine do a good job just making sure that they don't lose anything out here. If Sanguine make it out of it in exchange with their lives, I'd say that's a net positive for them. Now, the gold lead's only around 4,000. Radiance knows that they're not nearly as far as they were even just 2 minutes ago. Right now, though, BMT got a damage check against Rongyu. Strife plus Unruly Magic, that's about 50% of Rongyu's health. Now Rongyu has a target on his head. If Radiance can find any sort of CC on him, that's going to be his life. The same could be said of Aurora. They're both around level 12 to 11 at this point. No second relic available for Aurora either. This Gold Fury might be a fight that Sanguine can use that secondary relic to get the advantage.
They've caught back up a little bit, though, in terms of gold here at this point, so that's pretty relevant. I think it's opened up the map a bit for them, too, that they found this Tier 1 tower. But you were talking about how these supports could be viable targets, and Scarab's Blessing is always less powerful when the Kepler uses it on itself. And this Primal Fury belongs to Radiance. Sanguine end up backing, spreading out, and Radiance capitalized on it perfectly. They had a ward down there by Red Buff, and might have got just enough information to know they could grab the Fury.
That was a questionable back from me. Sanguine know that Radiance is stacked up there. They saw it before they went back to base, and instead they group up as 4 on the right side of the map. I thought we might have seen a cheeky Fire Giant attempt, but instead they just farm out the back camps, get themselves a blue buff, lose Gold Fury, lose a Tier 2 tower. Sanguine, this back might have been the straw that broke the Turtles' back. Now you're nearly 6,000 gold down. You're right back where you started.
And this is risky. They're starting up the Fire Giant. Yarkor is up in position to play defense, but Radiance really are not here in full force. In comes the Golden Apple. That doesn't find much. Sanguine give up the Fire Giant. Yarkor gets the ultimate off in time, just barely, to be able to rejoin this fight and try and help out. Panatom has grabbed a target. It was big man Tings that get the kill. Adapting lands at the back. There must have been a shell to keep them alive, because that should have been a kill, but Cyclone Spin completes it by taking care of Shinto. But now Sanguine are fully on the run. Riptide allows for them to look for the disengage, but Radiance are on the full-on chase. Adapting teleports to Hammer to look to lock down Panatom. There is the sash, but now he's the furthest member forward. Benji looks for more damage, but Radiance can't find any more lives.
1-man KO, 4-man TKO on the side of Sanguine. Radiance can look towards the Fire Giant. It looks like instead they're going to go for the Pyro. Maybe a little bit wary considering how low health Cyclone Spin is, but that's another win for Radiance. You trade out BMT, you get Shinto as well. That's mid lane for mid lane. And again, the gold lead continues to grow. We were looking at 5,000 just another minute back. Now it's closer to 8,000 as the game goes on. And this gold lead is starting to mean less. Around the 30-minute mark, both teams should look at 6 items in their build, but right now, Radiance is in the lead. They need to keep pushing it. If they can go towards the Fire Giant, force a fight, Sanguine have to rotate in. They don't have great ways to engage on multiple people, as we've already pointed out. That's going to be really hard to deal with when Radiance is 5 stacked on an objective.
And look at this build from Panatom. We haven't had much time to talk about it, but he has ended up going pretty utility, the Void Shield Wingblade and the Shield of Regrowth. So not only is their damage or their engage very much single target, but they're pretty much just relying on Shinto and Netriod to really finish off these kills, to be the heavy lifters in terms of their damage. Myth, do you think it'll be enough?
It's going to be hard. Already, we've seen that Shinto's had a hard time finding his taiko drums in the backline because the aggression from Benji, from the aggression from Adapting, it's going to be very difficult, especially considering Adapting just finished Heartseeker. Those dunks that were killing before, now they're overkilling.
But the FG is low. Yarkor is trying to disrupt, but Radiance strip the Fire Giant away. Netriod does get the kill onto Adapting, and Benji's taking a ton of damage too. The Scarab's Blessing lets him stay alive, but Panatom is close. As soon as the Scarab's Blessing is over, he's there with the Windfire Wheel, so Benji should be a done deal. He'll fall to Yarkor. Radiance might have got the FG, but it feels like this is Sanguine's moment.
They might be able to knock down a Phoenix here. The ultimate's still available for Discordia, which is going to be a huge AoE on this team fight, but the healthy targets on the side of Sanguine, all of them completely full health. 2 members dead on the side of Radiance for 30 seconds, and Aurora at only level 13, he's going to be pretty squishy. Any CC that finds his way home there should put him down.
Aurora pops the frenzy, but Cyclone Spin is the target. They get to him instantly and bring him to his knees. Aurora in trouble too. That's a double kill now for Netriod. But time is ticking, Adapting back up in 10 seconds, and the Phoenix still half health. Big damage from Tings. Does take care of Shinto, so that means Sanguine no longer have a chance to do more than this. They've got to get the Phoenix and leave, but Tings gets the double. River's Rebuke is all for the disengage, as Sanguine are full on retreating.
That's a nice defense from BMT, but it's bittersweet. You lose out on your Phoenix, you lose out on Fire Giant, on everyone except for BMT, so now Radiance doesn't really have that leg to stand on. Sure, there's still about 6,000 gold up, but this game is starting to mean less and less, or the gold rather is starting to mean less and less as the game goes on. The items are starting to come online for Sanguine, all approaching 6th item, Radiance as well. This game's pretty even, except now on the map, Radiance is missing a Phoenix. They have to contend with Fire Waves. If Sanguine decide to group up, which I think they should, then group up on left, get a tier 1, maybe back up to gold if the resistance is too strong for Radiance, and start to close this gold gap even further.
But it's worth talking, Mifflin, about how Sanguine got that great positioning around the Fire Giant in the first place. The reason that fight goes so well is because they burned the Fire Giant so quickly that Radiance had to overcommit to have a chance to steal, and Sanguine were able to win the fight pretty handily on the back of it.
Adapting lands in right as Sanguine tries to confirm it themselves, and it all lands on Adapting. He gets the kill, he gets the Fire Giant rather, but he loses his life in exchange, and then the entirety of Radiance is already there with him. We saw that all of them were trying to move up, defend the Fire Giant. Aurora moves up to try and find the Scarab's Blessing. It just wasn't quite enough. Sanguine burned it so quickly. It's kind of like that same play that Radiance got around Gold. They just reset too far around Fire Giant, and Sanguine optimized on it.
Well, Primal Fury being started by Sanguine. Don't let it get twisted. Radiance still in the driver's seat for now, even though it means less. Cursed Ankh does come out from Wrong-U to try and mitigate the Vamana healing, and that does send Benji running. Great poke on the Yarkor, though, as Big Man Tings is really starting to swing at this point in the game. Gold Fury started back up by Sanguine, though. Primal Fury dropped again. Radiance are nearby, so Sanguine know this won't be free.
The sustain from Umoja is really coming into play here. Yarkor was about half health, just 30 seconds back. Now, closer to about 80%. Wrong-U takes the ultimate from BMT. That's a huge teamfight tool lost on the side of Radiance. Wrong-U just going to go back to base, reset, regroup around Gold 3, and the entire time, this Firebending wave in mid is pushing up towards their Titan.
That's why you see Benji over there trying to deal with it. Yarkor goes into his ultimate. That must mean that Sanguine mean business at this point because it's such a big ultimate. They will use the Umoja ult to keep everyone zoned out, but Adapting can go up and over it. Primal Fury secured by Radiance, but what about the fight as the dunk was huge? Sanguine have scattered at this point like roaches when the lights come on, but what can Radiance do to try and lock them down? Nothing from Benji as the blink gets Panatom out of there. On the left side, Sanguine in more trouble as Adapting teleports over the wall with the hammer, and suddenly there's a big baby looking for Shinto in the backline, but there's just barely enough peel to allow Sanguine to reset. So Radiance keep up the chase under the Phoenix. They take down Yarkor. Wrong-U will fall as well as suddenly Radiance have flipped this game on its head.
Sanguine making it so far back there might be a double-edged sword. Now the respawns are staggered even further. Radiance get repulsed back on that push. They can't get the Phoenix themselves. A little bit of an overstay as Sanguine was able to make it back into base and re-engage. Now it's Radiance on the retreat, and they also have Firebending waves in their base. Sure, Adapting finds a 4-man dunk there. No one was in range on the side of Radiance to follow up. He does drop everyone down to low health, but it wasn't quite enough. Now, the game state back to even, except the Phoenix in mid, still dead on the side of Radiance. Fire Giant spawning in 20 seconds. Sanguine should have the aggressive positioning.
They do, but there is a big wave building up in left, and with the Titan at half HP, or not the Titan, but the left side Phoenix, it is at least worth a little bit of concern from Sanguine, but they've got the Pyromancer. Everyone should be able to regroup with them relatively quickly, and Netriod will take another back, so they should be able to be here for the Fire Giant without too much trouble. But this game has suddenly improved. Sanguine looked to be really struggling early on, but they've kept this game close, that they're still competitive at 31 minutes.
I mean, I'd say that this game is completely even. Benji picks up his elixir of speed. Now he's 6 items, actual items, no boots. My man is going shoeless at this point, and he's already been so impactful in this team fight. Looks like he finishes out the build with a Frostbound Hammer. Shinto is already having a hard time escaping. No Heavenlies on the side of Sanguine, only 1 shell. Means that Benji's going to have free reign the second he burns through those 3 defense stacks of shell. No one's going to be able to stop the aggression. They just have to return the damage.
Sanguine start at the FG again. Yarkor not here yet. He will TP in to a ward on the top side. He does keep a couple members busy, makes into the ultimate just barely, and has to disengage. I don't know how much value he got there, but it was pretty close to 0. As now Radiance recognize they've got an opportunity to step on the gas. Yarkor has to back. He doesn't have a choice.
Yarkor doesn't have his teleport available either. He might have just given up Fire Giant. Radiance still playing it cautious, hasn't grouped up on it, and Sanguine might just have enough time to regroup as the rest of Radiance seem like they're backing. That's an interesting play from both squads. Radiance trade out just about nothing in exchange for Yarkor's entire health bar and ultimate. You'd think that'd be the time to push into fire, but instead they regroup. They want to make sure that mid-Phoenix stays healthy. Spend out your gold, get your elixirs of speed online, and look for the engagement where you can. No relics available for Jormungandr, no ultimate either. He might be the target of aggression, but I imagine Adapting's got his eyes glued to Shinto.
Yeah, I mean, even if he's not the target, he just can't go up until the ultimate's back. There's just not enough safety for Jormungandr to be an effective frontliner without it. The good news is, though, it looks like Yarkor's topped off on CDR, Genji's cooldown boots, and the Spirit Robe, so his ultimate is back and available. Panatom goes in, but gets stuffed. Has to use the ultimate just to disengage, so it's adapting in the sky. He's found himself a target and dunked right on in. Netriod is also low HP. Radiance responding to that little window they had by bringing 2 members down low.
Both teams are just playing for the first pick, looking for any opportunity to push the advantage. So far, neither one's worked out. Sanguine's been able to use some of the sustain from Panatom's kit, from Rongyu's kit to stay in this fight a little bit longer, and now Ool's all the way back at the speed buff, and Fire Giant's already been pulled.
Down to half HP. Sanguine have to reset, though. They can't stick it. Yarkor goes into the ultimate and starts the backline dive. River's Rebuke locks in 2 members, and they burn Aurora quickly. That was the ultimate we've been waiting for from Rongyu. Big Man Tings puts the apple into the backline, but he doesn't find nearly enough damage. The Yamoja sustain, the Yamoja lockdown. At this point, it's too strong, Myth.
That's just Rongyu diff right there. He finds the commitment. Aurora doesn't even get a chance to use his ultimate in that engagement. That's poor play. The shell didn't get used either, so now the defensive relics will be up on the defense of the base if Sanguine does go for the Fire Giant, but instead, Benji getting chased out.
If he doesn't have Colossal Fury, they know that he is a weak target. Riptide pulls him back in. Rongyu continues to make the plays, but adapting hits everybody with the Anvil of Dawn. That might send it back in the other direction. Shinto does get the kill to bring the Thor down, but they lock down Cyclone Spin, but he finds a double-bladed arrow, hits everybody. Cyclone Spin with the triple does get the deicide, but it's just him and Tings. Can they do enough with just a Roar and a Discordia?
Every wave is pushed up. They have to wait for the tier 2 mid tower. They can't push through left. 40 seconds left on the spawners. They might be able to get an Oni Fury. They can't do Fire Giant. And don't ever ask me if Adapting could do more again. A 5-man duck? Are you insane? He completely changes the face of that fight on his own. I mean,
they were going to lose.
What more can you want from this man? They were going to lose. They were going to lose the entire game, the set. And Adapting says, hold up, guys. Hold my beer. I'm going to do it myself. I have to, it seems like it. And he does with a 5-man dunk. It's just so unfortunate that Cyclone Spin can't maintain his life to get a little bit more going. Oni Fury Wave will be able to open up some space for Radiance to maybe look towards Fire Giant going forward. Sanguine's going to have to contend with all these waves in every lane. But right now, I'd say the game state just straight back to even.
It is. This is the last bit of that engagement where Cyclone Spin was able to put in a ton of work. He doesn't end up making it through. It was really just the Khepri and the Discordia at the end, but he completed that deicide there for them and kept them in this match because Rongyu popped off. I was too busy celebrating how well my Yamoja man was playing. I barely had breath for adapting, but 2 big plays back-to-back, and this game maintains that state of parity.
It's so even that not even one team can look for Pyromancer here. Sanguine try and pick it off. They can't do it. They have to back up, and now Radiance has the defensive positioning around Fire. Again, these engagements have to go Radiance's way if Thor finds huge dunks. If Benji's able to separate Shinto from the engagement, the same can be said of Sanguine. If Panatom or Rongyu can find anyone stepping a little bit too far out of line, immediately Sanguine have to find that single target damage, get a pick. Hopefully Aurora doesn't find the Scarab's Blessing, and if he does, you just have to keep going forward.
Aurora does pluck in Rongyu, but Rongyu takes a ton of damage in return. Yarkor has teleported to the backline, but they know he's there, has to use the ultimate early, and so he knocks up Cyclone Spin and Tings. Adapting goes to the sky and sees where the backline is, but doesn't really like his options. Instead, he lands back and safely starts to farm. Meanwhile, Aurora and the boys have to fully disengage, but only one side has a Yamoja to try and heal this all back up.
That healing is coming slow. Panatom's so low health, it might be worth it just to return to base here. If it seems like Adapting's being choosy with his ultimates, it's because he only goes for 5 members from here on out. He only saw 2-man stack from Sanguine. That's not good enough for the king. Instead, he returns back to safety, doesn't trade out his life for anything, and it's going to, again, return to this Fire Giant dance. Sanguine hasn't been able to find a way in because the CC's really been coming from Radiance first. They've been choosing every single engagement. Sanguine have to wait for Rongyu to look for maybe a River's Rebuke to set them up, separate Aurora again, anything to open them up. Right now, again, the game's completely even.
Another good Riptide will pull Adapting in, but now Wrong Yu takes a ton of damage. He's been brought down to half. He lives through it all, though, and ends up making his way back out of there. Shinto used the Taiko drums as well, so a nice little victory there for Radiance as they're able to bait out a couple ultimates without having to give up much of their own.
Shinto has blue buff for some additional CDR, and he's got some CDR in his build as well, so those Taiko drums might not be down for as long as Radiance is hoping. If they did spot it out, if they hear him banging on those drums, this is the time for Radiance to start pushing the advantage. Rongyu and Shinto with no ultimate, Sanguine's teamfight phase is crippled.
Fire Giant has been pulled again, Mifflin, but Radiance can't afford to stay on it at this point. It's too hefty of a commitment. Panatom uses the sash to avoid getting grabbed by the Abduct, I believe. That's a big play he's able to make as Yarkor takes the apple, but does get to the sky in time, so he will not fall. Meanwhile, Adapting, being careful with his target, lands on Wrong Yu, but doesn't get enough. Meanwhile, Panatom was stuck in the middle of everybody and ends up falling first. Radiance have done enough to give themselves the advantage. They're pulling FG.
Yarkor was about to return to base, but doesn't have the teleport available at 1/4 health. Radiance, again, showing so much hesitation here. They have the advantage. They could look for the fight. Instead, they back up. Take a peek at the wards. It looks like a checkerboard around this Fire Giant. Both teams finding slight vision advantage everywhere on the map. Everyone knows what's happening everywhere in this game. Right now, Radiance can't feel good knowing that Sanguine have all the information. Instead, they're going to wait out a little bit longer, return to base, and heal up. Panatom's still dead for 30 seconds. Sanguine's going to have a hard time fighting into this defense.
It's great awareness from Radiance. They had time for this full reset and then to start the Fire Giant, still with the advantage. Now with the vision advantage, as you said, on the actual Fire Giant pit itself. The FG's down to half. This fight could determine the set as Radiance bring the Fire Giant down even lower. Sanguine right around the edge, start to move in. They drop the River's Rebuke. That zones out a couple members, but Adapting wants the back line. Up in the air with the Anvil of Dawn. Dunks down, finds Shinto, forces Beads and Aegis and keeps up the chase. Wrong though, does find the root. The return damage is strong, but Aegis immunes a lot of it as Adapting stays alive. But they've got Yarkor rooted on the front line, but he blows up Adapting, not planning to go down just yet. Somehow Sanguine have found enough of a defense.
Panatom's back and healthy. The majority of Radiance is around 1/4 health now. If Panatom can find anyone with a Windfire Wheel, that'll be another pick, another way in. Yarkor just TP'd in!
That means they've got another health bar here, Mifflin, another tanky member that can look for a bit more. Aurora now drops, Adapting dead for another 45 seconds, and it's Sanguine with the opportunity to get the Fire Giant in the late game. Radiance could not fight through cleanly enough to capitalize on that opportunity.
40 seconds left on Adapting spawn. They should be able to burn down this Fire Giant and then immediately move in towards the mid-Phoenix. Adapting will spawn with his ultimate. He should be able to respond from Fountain, but it's not enough. Aurora's dead for 40 seconds, and Panatom forces the beads on Cyclone Spin?
And makes it out of there alive, too. It cost him the ultimate and his beads. They're both on cooldown, but now Cyclone Spin's a sitting duck. Hindu Man, 41 minutes ago, mentioned Ullr's lack of crowd control immunity on the ultimate. He might be vulnerable right now as Sanguine move into the mid-Phoenix, and they're burning it quickly. Netriod should be able to bring it down without too much trouble. Remember, Sanguine got this Phoenix earlier in the game, so they burn it without any kind of fight and get right on out of there.
Adapting on respawn, I can't blame them. That's a hard fight to go into, especially considering with 2 towers still up on the side of Radiance, they have to worry about the defenses on the Titan, the additional health. Instead, Sanguine, with the first real advantage of the late game, decides to back up, play it slow. Maybe they look for a gold 3 to help out with the next objective. Maybe they look to push out these towers first. But right now, all this single target CC engage that they had before that was kind of a downside in these grouped even engagements around Fire Giant should help them out a lot on these engagements around the Phoenix. With 5 members stacked up in front of them, anyone hit by Sash should get the response of Shinto's abilities. Yarkor can spit on them as well. There's a lot of damage that can come out from a range, and Sanguine are in the advantage. Their siege is very strong.
What a game it's been, though. What a set this has been. What a first phase for Season 7 of the SPL, and it all shall culminate in how this set comes to its conclusion. Sanguine and Radiance battling it out as 2 of our top teams to try and go into the playoffs with some form of momentum. Sanguine want to go into the playoffs as the first seed overall if they can find it, and that's what's on the line as they've got FG to start pushing in. A 4-1 split. They put Yarkor in the mid lane by himself. Everyone else wants to step up on the left-hand side. We have not even had that many sieges. It's been so much fighting over the Fire Giant, and Sanguine continue to play it slow as the mid Phoenix is already down.
Yarkor's got fire waves at his back now, and his semi-global ultimate means that he can get into the fight whenever he needs to. Adapting, uses the hammer at a short range, might get caught out.
Yarkor is going to put out some damage, but he's not as much of a threat by himself. But look at the Phoenix! It's already melted. Sanguine have burned through a second one of these late-game structures and opened up the base of Radiance even further. There's now just one tower left on the Chaos side. That's on the right side of the map, and Sanguine can deal with that later. They will back, they will reset, and start to group again. They're so patient in these moments, Mifflin. I think that's why it's so hard to beat them.
They don't give the enemy team any mistakes to work off of. Sanguine has a full minute left on this Fire Giant. That tier 2 that you pointed out earlier on right, its days are numbered. That could instantly fall. Radiance can't defend it because they have to contend with fire minion waves in both of their lanes outside of right. Fire Giant will spawn about 2 minutes from now. Sanguine's going to have the advantage there as well. The Phoenixes won't be back up in time. Maybe Radiance can get the mid Phoenix back up, but it's not going to be quite enough. Instead, they're going to group up on right, see what they can do. If Radiance decide to, they might be able to set up an ambush and catch out some over-aggression from Sanguine if they come in lacking.
They might not know the Yorm is here. Now they've got the sense. The Riptide didn't lock them down, but Sanguine are on the hunt. 30 seconds left on this Fire Giant buff, though. Then it falls off, and this is back to a fair fight. The only difference is Radiance still has to worry about these firemen in the left and mid wave. Everyone has relics for this next fight here in Mist, so it should be relatively heads up since Sanguine are about to lose the buff in 20 seconds.
Yeah, next engagement, 5-on-5, I imagine it's going to be 20 relics up, 10 ultimates as well. But instead, Sanguine, with just the last dredges of Fire Giant, are to group up on this Phoenix. That's a risky play.
They're hitting me with that one for all here at this point. Aurora gets locked down. Panatom cannot complete the chase. It's Yarkor who has to retreat. I say it, but he uses the ultimate aggressively. Now he's on his way back out of there. Yarkor still has teleport, though. If he wants to back and come back in, he has that luxury. Sanguine could keep up the chase, or they could back up and look for another FG fight, but Benji blinks in, knocks up Netriod, who regroups at the back line. Benji takes a ton of damage, has to use Colossal Fury, but he's able to make it back out.
The Fire Minion waves are now making contact with the Titan. It's dropping down to around 80% health. Sanguine sees all of Radiance in their base, and they know if they back up, get the ward dominance, they can look at another enhanced Fire Giant 46 minutes into the game and just continue this onslaught on the enemy Titan. Radiance's defense is good, but it's already been broken. There's one Phoenix down for another minute or so. The mid Phoenix is never going to be the same that it was. It's already injured. Now, Sanguine in the driver's seat, power play, gold lead still in favor of Radiance, well, that means absolutely nothing at this point of the game. Sanguine absolutely can just blow it open with one more Fire Giant.
I wonder if it will come down to another Fire Giant. Do you defend here if you're Radiant? It looks like they're in position.
It's a risky call, but if you can make it, if that's the only way you know you can win an engagement head-on, if Adapting finds another huge ultimate, that might be one way in.
Well, already there's some low members. Adapting dunks onto the backline. He has found Netriod, but not a kill. And now he's stuck in the River's Rebuke. The hammer allows him to reposition. The Scarab's Blessing comes out too. So Adapting continues to live. Yarkor retreats as well. Sanguine, being so careful, playing that desperate tightrope back to try and find some way to get this W. But instead, they give up on the Fire Giant and start looking for more damage. Big strike from Tings over the wall means Sanguine are low again, but Radiance can't capitalize on any of it, and Sanguine continue to heal as they start up the FG, but Radiance are looking for another engage. Yarkor is on the front line trying to keep them zoned. Benji has made his way in, pulls out another Colossal Fury. Cursed Ankh is the response. Fire Giant still leashed, finally gets reset as Yarkor hovers to the right side.
Adapting clears out some waves and left, buys some time for the Titan, but it's falling low, now around half health. No ultimate available for Khepri means that there's no safety net. Adapting's ultimate's still down for a little bit. Sanguine could back up to Fire Giant or look for a pick themselves. As long as they keep the pressure up, someone's going to have to respond to these fire minion waves. Now it's Benji in left lane trying to keep his Phoenix alive. Sanguine want to push some sort of advantage, but this fight's been going on so long and the Fire Giant is fully reset.
Adapting and Cyclone Spin, preventing Sanguine from finding their backs, and that's critical at times like this to see if Radiance can do enough to keep Sanguine wounded, to keep them injured so that they can be in position for the next fight. But they have to relent. They send Benji off to clear up the minions over in the long lane. They send Adapting to clear up mid. That gives Sanguine time to fully reset, to get healthy. Panatom had to use his ultimate defensively at one point in that fight. Now he gets some time to try and build that ultimate back up and look for another fight. This is still close, man. Radiance absolutely could still win. Remember, they could just force it down left and take that Phoenix. They still have a shot if they win a team fight by enough.
I would say there's a small swing in favor of Radiance. Now all their Phoenixes are back up. The map's back to an even state. Sure, their Phoenixes are a little bit weaker, but one engagement is all it's going to take, as you pointed out. Now Oni Fury being looked at by Sanguine, they'd love to pick this up to create space to get the Fire Giant, and Radiance already on the response, not even willing to give this up 50 minutes into the game.
Well, Oni Fury's a big deal, I would still think, because you have to worry about all those extra waves, especially if Sanguine gets it. Yark Core is in trouble, gets the ultimate off just barely in time. Adapting responds with an ultimate of his own from up top. He can see the members of Sanguine, but there is no good target. Instead, he heads back towards mid and chooses to play it safe. They've relied so much on big ults from Adapting that he has to be careful with where he uses them. As Oni Fury's low, Radiance don't want to give this one up for free. And the Fire Giant, not the Fire Giant, the Fury ends up going to Radiance. Panatom tries to find a sash, but has to disengage. The Riptide pulls Aurora back in, but they don't have the lockdown. Radiance get away with stealing the objective.
BMT's damage output in that engagement was such a dissuasion factor for Sanguine. Anytime Unruly Magic gets dropped, even the small ticks were enough to make Sanguine feel uncomfortable. Now Radiance, back from the brink, two Phoenixes respawn, Fire Minion Waves, or Oni Minion Waves I should say, on their side. Fire Giant left uncontested by both teams right now. Vision largely in favor of Sanguine as they have a couple more wards. If Radiance can group up first, get the defensive positioning around Fire, this might be the best positioning they've been in the last 15 minutes.
It has, and look at some of these late game itemization choices. Staff of Mirrodin for big man Tings, for the double ability off the back of one of those ultimate uses. There is some anti-heal for Sanguine at their disposal too to try and deal with this mana to go alongside that Cursed Ankh. The Typhon's Fang is in there for Shinto along with the Soul Gem. It's not just the Emoja. There's some other areas where there's some sustain here for Sanguine.
There are, but Yarkor keeps losing so much health before these engagements starts. He keeps trading out his teleport early on. Sure, you can be the frontliner, you can be there, and you have to teleport back in, but you can only do it once. Now Fire or Oni Minion Waves bleeding down the left-hand side. Yarkor is going to try and respond. The second Radiance sees that, they should take that opportunity, force the teleport, go to the Fire Giant, do whatever you want to open up this game. If Adapting can find another ultimate, it's been a while since he's got a good one, that could be just it. Sanguine now slipping away with their lead. The Phoenixes completely healed up, as healthy as they're going to get, and Radiance have defensive positioning.
And it's the poke differential. Radiance are so much better at it. That's why they're at the top of those player damage charts in these prolonged engagements. Fire Giant dropped as Radiance don't feel like they have enough to try and force this fight. And look at Yarkor. He's walking his way over. He's not going to use his teleport, though Panatom does have to use the Windfire Wheels. So no ultimate for the Najah jungle, but Yarkor will still have that extra life in his back pocket,
which is going to be incredibly nice for him. He's going to have to work his way in. Panatom pushed up a little bit far on right, gets spotted out. Adapting, looking for the dunk.
He lands right into the backline, wants to get rid of Shinto, but he does not have the damage. Panatom blows him up right away. Benji now looking for the disengage as well, but Yarkor comes pouring in with that Jormungandr ultimate. Shinto takes care of Aurora. Now Cyclone Spin in trouble on the right side. Sash lets him keep up the chase. Cyclone Spin gets one, but it won't be enough as Netriod cuts him down to size. Sanguine in 51 minutes now have the final advantage, and they'll start pushing on the right side.
I'm not willing to count Radiance out just yet. We've seen what BMT can do on these defenses. Discordia is absolutely crippling. It's going to be so hard to get through. Strife and Unruly Magic miss. Sanguine have a free way in.
Netroid dashing to the backline, trying to keep Tings out of this one. Meanwhile, Benji largely ignored by the Sanguine boys. They turn their attention back towards the right side, Phoenix, and bring it down, opening up the base of Radiance yet again. But do they feel comfortable in the 4v2? Netroid and Rongyu are both low HP, 25 seconds before Adapting comes back out to rejoin Radiance. But Yarkor's already in. The River's Rebuke has been dropped as well. They're looking to all in the Titan. Rongyu lives through the damage coming up from the apple. Netroid still takes to the sky. Benji gets one, but it is not enough. Sanguine able to take the win over Radiance and your first seed.
That is, what a great way to secure yourself the first seed. You get a bye round going forward. 52 minutes. They didn't make it easy. Radiance looked like they might be able to make their way back in. My heart goes out to Adapting, man. I can't see a 5-man dunk and then not root for the boy, but that just goes to show you, play it perfectly, get punished. Sanguine were the better team today.
They played really well, didn't we? I mean, obviously that game one was really dominant for them, but Radiance showed a lot of grit here as well. I kind of covered it back towards the beginning. They didn't necessarily have a ton to fight for. Their playoff scenario was going to be largely the same, but they brought everything today, and they really gave us a show. Well, either way, though, we're just about...
What an adventure of a Game 3 there, right? It was such a roller coaster that came through. But speaking of adventuring, there's the Adventuring Collection bundle now available in-game. Spellchanter Apollo, Revenant Achilles, Dragon Priestess Nox, Swift Scarier Neath, all of them available in this bundle. But Hindu, not just, great skins, great games that came out today and all of Phase 1 as a whole. But now looking at this, what I would describe as a literal roller coaster of a game. It felt like no matter where you take it, in 5-minute chunks, somebody else was able to control that game and just make a big difference.
I mean, I'm looking at the script, and that wasn't supposed to happen till semi-finals at Worlds. And honestly, that was a great set between these two. Obviously, both teams did have a little something to play for. Sanguine, most importantly, can we just take into account, most people believe Sanguine will be the bottom two this split. Most people believe that they didn't deserve to be in the Pro League. And most people are downright wrong, because this team just won the split off the back of that game. They had it the whole way through in terms of their own destiny was their own choice. And my, oh my, full credit to Sanguine here. But Radiance put on a show today, specifically Adapting. When you want a player to get hot, it's right around LAN time. It's right around playoffs time. And guess what's coming up? The playoffs. And Radiance, they're going to be a threat if they can play like this. On the day, though, it's Sanguine that ends up getting the W because they played just as hard.
It's not every day that Adapting ends up with somehow like a 5-minute long Thor montage, at least the capabilities of making one, all from a single game there. I mean, a 5-man dunk to start this one off, and you can see how many of the plays, especially early on, started off that same way for Radiance. Unfortunately, it was actually that same start for Radiance that ended up going wrong there at the very end. I think a dunk kind of turned on its head that really does end the game, and all around the Fire Giant pit, not even taking the Fire Giant away was, I think, maybe the most impressive thing Sanguine did at the end. Yeah. And when you look at it, I mean, kills pretty high up there, but not an insane amount. It really is these standout slash lines like the 5-2 and 9, the 7-3 and 8, or 6-1 and 8 there for Netriod that, come to the forefront.
Yeah, I think the one thing that comes to the forefront for me overall is where the damage is shared. But one thing we saw out of Radiance here was a bit more of an identity now of what they're looking to play through. Biggie was talking in the interview pre-game for Radiance about how they're looking to try and, work together as a unit, where the strengths and weaknesses are going to be. And I think you're starting to see that the idea is we're playing through Adapting, and Aurora will take more of a backseat to an extent and be a facilitator, which is something we've not seen as much on. I think a lot of people were talking about his Capri play there. I think he played it fantastically, honestly, overall. Yeah. Everyone kind of looking at his level the whole time. Trust me, unless you've played support, if there's a 2-level differential between you and the support, that's normal. Anything more than that, you can start talking about. Being pre-level 20 at 40 minutes in, supports end up that way, boys. Play it and you'll know what it's like when you've got to be there to support your stupid carries that are still diving in. It's a hard task. But enough about that. On to Sanguine. What a great performance from them overall. Yeah. Back from the brink. And honestly, Sanguine deserve all the love in the world for the performance they've had this split. The question is, can they keep it going now when it's even more important with playoffs next week?
Well, you had mentioned damage numbers in that, and I zoned in on one number. I think it was 63,000 damage that was done there by Big Man, and the next highest I saw was 39,000. So obviously the damage on the side of Radiance, but the play, like you had mentioned, on the side of Sanguine. As it goes the day, they are able to clutch that first place spot going into next week, and who better to talk about that than Sanguine themselves? We've got Wrong You standing by.
Thanks, Score. Wrong You. First off, man, just congratulations. This has been such an impressive phase. I was one of the people that doubted you all coming in here, but you've absolutely proved me and everybody else wrong. Before we even get into the X's and O's, what's it feel like, man, to be able to come in and get that first place overall?
Yeah, I mean, first year for us in the SPL and getting the first place, it's amazing, feels good, but I think we don't feel like champions yet because we have to win the MSIs, so just keep grinding, you know?
That's right. I love that you guys are still focused because there is still a big tournament that's looming, and really, that's where you all need to perform because it's where you get the most points that head over into Phase 2 and help you all out for Worlds. Well, talk to me a little bit about the game specifically now, Wrong You, because you had got to play Yamoja in all 3 games in this set. You looked excellent on it. Is that something you're really comfortable on? Talk to you about how the team likes when you're on that pick.
Yeah, first, when Yamoya was like a new god, I didn't play her at all. I was super bad at her. I mean, probably I'm not that good with Yamoya, to be honest, but at first I was so bad with Yamoya. I was like, damn, I'm not playing this god, guys, so sorry. But then, but then I started playing it and playing it and playing it like every day, every hour, and I get better with Yamoya. So that's why I think I like it, and it's probably the best support right now.
Hey man, it's paying off to me because you were making some really sick plays really the entirety of this set. Well, talk to you about the rest of the guys too. I know that you all are focused. You don't really feel like necessarily celebrating here at this point, but what's the team environment like when you've had to play so hard these last few weeks and you've kind of made it to this point now where everyone has to admit how strong you guys are?
Yeah, there was a pressure that we didn't know because we were just like, okay, this is our last SPL match, okay. But then we were like, oh, so if we lose, we wouldn't make first or second. Then was like, oh. But yeah, all the team is like hype right now. We want to keep playing the SPL, keep demonstrating to the fans, to Blaine, and all our families that we are here to play.
Well, hey, man, we want you all to keep playing, too, so please make sure that we get to see some more Sanguine. Appreciate everything. Taking some time to talk to you, man. You guys have looked great. Good luck in the playoffs. And I'm going to get back over to Gore. He's got a little bit more for you all before we close out the day.
Well, first off, I'm excited just to see what we're seeing out of Sanguine as well. I think everybody should be at this point. The league truly is as close as it's ever been. I think the score lines throughout Phase 1 so far, Hindu, maybe don't quite reflect what we're seeing in it. I mean, even people on E United were saying after, unfortunately getting knocked out since Renegades got their win, that, their scoreline doesn't reflect the way they have grown throughout the day. But if you were wondering what happened this weekend, today was probably the most important of all of them. Yesterday, whoever won between SSG and Ghost would be able to guarantee themselves second place. Today, Sanguine found themselves first place. Renegades fought their way into the top 6, so they get that playoff spot. And this is a very solid-looking standings.
Oh, yeah, and Renegades will get in above United, even though everything's all tied up there. The head-to-head comes into play, and that's where Renegades find that window into the top 6. When you think about how this is going to play out now, next weekend we're going to have the playoffs, and my oh my, now that we know the standings go, this playoff bracket is insane. Yeah. This is going to be a good one. I mean, Sanguine, and the winner of that has to... Sorry, whoever wins that Knights of Radiance goes on to face Sanguine, so maybe we get a repeat semi-final of what we just saw there.
I mean, another 3-game set with a 50-minute third game, I'm absolutely okay with that one if it comes that way. But this is why we've been talking about standings so much lately, guys. You can see Sanguine and Space Station having that bye round. And, well, it does depend on who you're going to get up against. SSG maybe having to face off against Ghost, having to face against Renegades. I don't think there's a team you would rather hedge your bets against in anywhere on this bracket. It's going to be kind of dangerous overall throughout all of that. I mean, maybe you take your bets with Renegades and you're like, yeah, you know what? Go ahead and give me those guys, at least for the first set. But I mean, there's so much that can go right, go wrong for all of these teams. It's going to be a great weekend.
It really will be. And the big thing about the playoffs as well for you all to realize is that the league is the first stage of this. It gets you some points by guaranteeing yourself a chance at playoffs. But when you get to playoffs, the points are more important. And the points being prizes at the end of the day, which, we'll explain to you a little bit later on.
Well, that is going to do it, as we have mentioned, for Phase 1 so far of the SPL. And we do appreciate you hanging out with us. But again, we've been talking a lot about these playoffs and things. You just see a bracket for it, but how do these playoffs work? What exactly is going to be going on? Well, luckily, we actually have Aggro here to explain to you what we're going to be seeing as the playoffs go forward.
Hey there, SMITE fans, Aggro here. So far, Season 7 has been, without a doubt, the most competitive and, in my mind, the most fun season of the SPL to watch probably ever. And it's all been in the name of getting to Phase 1 playoffs. So, now that we're basically here, what does Phase 1 playoffs even mean? We don't want all of our SMITE fans looking like John Travolta, looking around all over the place. We want you to know what's going on. So here's the deal with what's going on in Phase 1 playoffs. The top 6 teams in the SPL, which is Ghost, Sanguine, PK, SSG, Radiance, and Renegades, have now qualified into the Phase 1 playoffs. But what is that? Phase 1 playoffs is going to be a single elimination bracket, with the top 2 teams in the SPL earning a bye into the semifinals directly. The rest of the teams will battle it out in the quarterfinals, and it'll be best of 5 matches all the way through, so it's sure to be a good, long weekend of competitive SMITE. But it's really about what these teams are playing for. Not only is it a good chunk of cash, $100,000 on the line, with first place taking home half of it, $50K for the first place team, but it's also about these SPL points. SPL points are how you get to the World Championships. And that's what really everyone is playing for in the long term, is raising the hammer at the very end of Season 7. SPL points are how you qualify to the World Championship. Now, there's tons of information on this at smiteproleague.com, but I can break it down for you here real quick. The number 1 team at Phase 1 playoffs will earn 90 SPL points. Second place team will earn a little bit less. Third place team will earn a little bit less. So on and so forth down the line. And at the end of Season 7, whoever has the most SPL points will automatically qualify to the World Championship, not to go and watch, not even at the lower bracket. You automatically get the 2nd seed at the SMITE World Championship by having the most SPL points. So these are incredibly important. But what about those 7th and 8th place teams? Well, let's just say Cooper is not feeling generous with the SPL points. 0 for 7th and 8th place. So between competing for their share of $100,000 and these incredibly important SPL points, I think teams are going to be stepping up their game a little bit, which, if what we've seen from the first half of the year is any indication, should make for some incredible SMITE. It's all happening June 12th through the 14th on all of our usual channels, so hopefully you'll be tuning in, and we'll see you there for the Phase 1 playoffs.